I've borne witness to horrors beyond mortal comprehension. My companions and I, seekers of truth hidden in the shadows, have traversed the globe in pursuit of spectral phenomenon. Yet nothing could have prepared us for the eldritch terrors that awaited us on the blood-soaked soil of a long-forgotten American battlefield. Our small band of ghost hunters consisted of 4 souls bound by an insatiable curiosity for the supernatural. There was myself, descended from a long line of Bavarian mystics; Hans Mueller, a skeptical physicist whose rational mind had been shaken by an encounter with a poltergeist in his youth; Greta Werber, an expert on occult history whose family had guarded arcane secrets for generations; and Klaus Bayer, a former priest whose crisis of faith had led him to seek answers in the realm of spirit. We had come to this desolate corner of Virginia at the behest of a local historian who had reported strange occurrences on the site of a Civil War skirmish. Locals spoke in hushed tones of unearthly sounds echoing across the mist-shrouded fields at night, of phantom soldiers seen marching in formation, of an oppressive atmosphere that seemed to seep into one's very bones. As our rented vehicle bounced along the rutted road leading to the site, I felt a growing sense of unease. The lush green countryside seemed to darken with every passing mile, the very air growing thick and oppressive. Hans even rationalized, attempting to lighten the mood with jokes about American ghost stories, but his laughter rang hollow in the unnatural stillness. We arrived at the designated coordinates just as the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the overgrown fields before us. An old, dilapidated farmhouse stood on the edge of the property, its windows dark and foreboding. As we unloaded our equipment, EMF meters, infrared cameras, other tools of the trade, I noticed that Greta had gone very pale. "There's something wrong here," she whispered, her eyes darting nervously across the landscape. "Can't you feel it? It's as if the very ground is hungry." Klaus laid a comforting hand on her shoulder, but I could see the concern etched on his weathered face. "We've faced dark forces before, mein Freund. Whatever lurks here, we shall face it together." As twilight deepened into true night, we began our investigation. Hans and Greta took readings near the old farmhouse, while Klaus and I ventured into the field proper. The tall grass whispered against our legs as we moved, and more than once I could have sworn I heard muffled sounds of gunfire. "It's just the wind," I muttered to myself, though the air was eerie still, or perhaps some local teens playing pranks. Klaus shook his head grimly. "This is no prank, Wilhelm. There's an awareness here. Can't you sense it? It's as if 1,000 eyes are watching our every move." I was about to respond when my foot struck something solid in the grass. Kneeling down, I brushed away the vegetation to reveal a rusted piece of metal. As I lifted it, my blood ran cold. It was a belt buckle, corroded by time, but still bearing the unmistakable insignia of a Confederate soldier. "Klaus," I called, my voice trembling, "I think we've found—" My words were cut short by a piercing scream from the direction of the farmhouse. We sprinted back, our hearts pounding, to find Hans supporting a shaking Greta, her face ashen, her eyes wide with terror. "The basement! I saw! God, I saw!" Before she could finish, a low, rumbling sound began to emanate from beneath our feet. The ground itself seemed to tremble, and a foul, rotten stench filled the air. From the shadowy doorway of the farmhouse, a sickly green light began to pulse, growing brighter with each passing second. "We need to leave," Hans said urgently, already beginning to guide Greta towards the vehicle. "Whatever this is, it's beyond our expertise. We need to call in reinforcements. Maybe even—" His words were drowned out by a deafening roar as the green light exploded outward, engulfing us all in a sticky glow. I felt a sensation of falling, being pulled downward by unseen hands, and then darkness, absolute and all-encompassing. When I regained consciousness, I found myself lying face down in cold, damp earth. The air was thick with the metallic scent of blood and the acrid tang of gunpowder. Slowly, I raised my head, blinking to clear my vision. What I saw defied all rational explanation. Gone was the overgrown field and the dilapidated farmhouse. Instead, I found myself in the midst of a raging battle. Union and Confederate soldiers clashed all around me, their uniforms pristine, their faces set in grim determination. Yet, there was something profoundly wrong with the scene. The soldiers moved with an unnatural fluidity, their forms seeming to shimmer and distort at the edges. Their eyes, dear God, their eyes were empty, black voids that seemed to draw in all light. I scrambled to my feet, desperately searching for my companions. "Hans! Greta! Klaus!" I shouted, my voice lost in the cacophony of battle. Just as I turned, I realized with mounting horror that the fighting seemed to be focused on a central point, a swirling vortex of that same sickly green energy we had seen in the farmhouse. And at its edge stood a figure that I could only describe as an abomination. It towered over the phantom soldiers, its form a writhing mass of tentacles and eyes, constantly shifting and reforming. Where its head should have been, a pulsing orb of that verdant light throbbed in time with the vortex. As I watched, paralyzed with terror, I saw it reach out with its pseudopod and grasp one of the spectral combatants. The soldier's form seemed to dissolve, drawn into the creature as it let out a sound that was part scream and part laugh. "Wilhelm!" A hand grasped my shoulder, and I whirled to find Klaus standing behind me, his face pale but determined. "We have to find the others and get out of here." I nodded numbly, allowing him to guide me through the chaos of the battlefield. The phantom soldiers paid us no heed, locked in their eternal struggle as we moved. I began to notice other anomalies, patches of the modern world bleeding through the Civil War tableau. Here, a cluster of our scientific instruments lay scattered in the mud. There, a piece of the old farmhouse wall stood incongruously amidst a grove of trees that looked centuries old. "What's happening?" I shouted to Klaus, as we ducked to avoid a volley of musket fire that passed harmlessly through our bodies. "Have we gone mad?" "I fear it's worse than that. I believe we've stumbled into a tear in the fabric of reality. This place, it's a nexus point where multiple timelines are converging. That thing at the center, it's feeding on chaos, growing stronger with each soul it consumes." Before I could process this terrifying information, we heard a familiar voice calling out, "Over here, quickly!" We turned to see Hans waving frantically from the shelter of a crumbling stone wall. As we approached, I saw Greta huddled beside him, her eyes wide and unfocused. "She's in shock," he explained, as we crouched beside him. "I found her wandering in a daze near that thing. Wilhelm, Klaus, what is happening? In God's name, what is going on?" I opened my mouth to respond, but the words died in my throat as I saw the expression of abject horror that dawned on Hans's face. Following his gaze, I turned to see the battlefield had fallen silent. The phantom soldiers stood motionless, their empty eyes all turned in our direction. Beyond them, towering and terrible, was the abomination. He began to move towards us. Each step it took seemed to distort the very air around us. Reality rippled and warped, images from different eras bleeding into one another. I saw glimpses of the field as it must have looked during the Civil War, flashes of the overgrown present that we had just encountered, and terrifying visions of a blasted, lifeless future. "We have to do something," Klaus said, his voice steady despite the fear that he must be feeling. "We can't let that thing break through to our world." Greta stirred then, her eyes focusing for the first time since we'd found her. "The vortex. It's a wound in time. If we can close it..." Hans shook his head. "With what? We're not equipped to deal with anything like this." As the others argued, I found my gaze drawn to the belt buckle I had discovered. It still lay clutched in my hand, forgotten in the chaos. As I stared at it, a wild, desperate idea began to form. "Our equipment," I said suddenly, cutting through the debate. "Hans, you said it was scattered across the battlefield, yes? If we can gather it, maybe we can use it to disrupt the energy field surrounding that thing." Klaus caught on immediately. "Yes, and if we can weaken it, perhaps we can push it through the vortex before it fully manifests in our reality." It was a long shot, but it was the only plan we had. As the abomination drew ever closer, we split up to gather what we could from our ghost hunting gear. I found myself sprinting across the nightmare landscape, snatching up EMF meters and infrared cameras as I went. All around me, the phantom soldiers began to stir once again, their movements growing more frenzied and erratic. As I ran, I felt a strange doubling of my vision. One moment I was dodging musket fire and cannon blasts. The next I was stumbling through overgrown weeds in the present day. The two realities seemed to be combining, fighting for dominance, and through it all that sickly green light pulsed stronger and stronger. I reunited with the others at the edge of the vortex, our arms full of equipment. The abomination loomed before us, its countless eyes fixed upon our small group with malevolent intelligence. "Now what?" Hans shouted over the rising wind that whipped around us. "We've got to overload it," Greta called back, her earlier shock seemingly forgotten. "Turn everything on at once. Push it to the limit." As one, we activated each piece of equipment we had. The air filled with the shriek of feedback and the whine of overtaxed electronics. The abomination recoiled, its form rippling and distorting even more violently than before. But it wasn't enough. Even as we poured every ounce of energy we could into the makeshift weapon, I could see the creature beginning to push back. The vortex was widening, the boundaries between worlds growing thinner by the second. In desperation, I pulled out the Confederate belt buckle. "Klaus, you said this place was a nexus of timelines. What if we could use something from the past to stabilize the present?" Understanding dawned in his eyes. Without a word, he snatched the buckle from my hand and hurled it directly into the heart of the vortex. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like reality itself tearing apart, the swirling energies began to collapse. The abomination let out a shriek that threatened to shatter our eardrums, its form beginning to unravel. "It's working," Hans yelled triumphantly. "Keep pushing." We redoubled our efforts, forcing every last bit of power through our equipment. The vortex continued to shrink, dragging the writhing form of the abomination back into whatever hellish dimension it had emerged from. And then, with a final earth-shaking roar, it was gone. The vortex snapped shut, leaving behind nothing but a scorched patch of earth and the lingering scent of ozone. We stood there, panting and shell-shocked, as reality settled back into place around us. The phantom soldiers had vanished, leaving behind only the overgrown field and the dilapidated farmhouse that we had once encountered. Is it over? Greta asked hesitantly, breaking the stunned silence that had fallen over us. Before any of us could answer, a low and ominous rumble began to emanate from beneath our feet. The ground trembled, and in the distance we could see storm clouds gathering with unnatural speed. "I don't think so," Klaus said grimly. "I fear we've only delayed the inevitable. Whatever that thing was, it's still out there, still trying to break through." Hans nodded in agreement. "We need to warn someone, the authorities, other paranormal researchers, anyone who might be able to help prevent this from happening again." As we gathered our scattered equipment and made our way back to our vehicle, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The weight of unseen eyes seemed to press down on us, and whispers just beyond the edges of our hearing teased at our senses. We had survived our encounter with the unknown, but at what cost? What horrors still awaited us in the battles to come? As we drove away from that accursed place, I knew with grim certainty that our war against the darkness had just begun. The road ahead stretched out before us, leading into an uncertain and terrifying future, but we would face it together, armed with the knowledge we had gained and the unshakable bond forged in the crucible of cosmic horror, for we are ghost hunters, and our hunt continues. As our vehicle sped away from the haunted battlefield, an oppressive silence settled over all of us. Each lost in our own thoughts, we grappled with the cosmic horror that we had witnessed, and the chilling knowledge that our ordeal was far from over. The countryside blurred past the windows. The encroaching darkness seemed to swallow the last vestiges of daylight. It was Greta who finally broke the silence, her voice barely above a whisper. We can't just leave. Whatever that was, that thing, it's still out there. We have a responsibility to stop it." Hans gripped the steering wheel even tighter, his knuckles white. "And how do you propose we do that, Greta? We barely escaped with our lives. We've no equipment to handle something of that magnitude." "No one is," Klaus interjected, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "But Hans is right about one thing. We need to warn others. There are organizations, secret societies that deal with threats like this. I have connections from my time with the clergy." I turned to Klaus, surprised. In all our years of working together, he had never mentioned such connections. "What kind of organization?" I asked. "The kind that operates in the shadows, Wilhelm. The kind that guards humanity against threats most people couldn't even comprehend. I had hoped never to contact them again, but—" He trailed off, his expression grim. As if in response to Klaus's ominous words, a flash of green lightning split the sky, followed by a roll of thunder that seemed to shake the very earth. Hans swerved, nearly sending us off the road. "Mein Gott, it's following us," he said. I cranked my neck to look out the rear window. What I saw chilled me to my core. A wall of roiling storm clouds was rapidly gaining on us, shot through with pulses of that sickly green energy we had come to associate with the abomination. And within those clouds, I could have sworn I saw shapes forming and dissolving, grotesque, writhing forms that defied description. "Hans, I think you'd better drive faster." As Hans pressed down on the accelerator, Greta rummaged through her bag, pulling out a worn, leather-bound tome. "There might be something in here," she said, flipping through the pages with shaking hands. "It's an old family grimoire. I've never fully understood all of it, but there are protection spells, banishing rituals." "Now you tell us about this," Hans snapped, his usual skepticism forgotten in the face of our dire situation. "I didn't think we needed it," Greta shot back. "Most of our investigations have been, well, mundane compared to this. Restless spirits, local legends, nothing like She gestured helplessly at the encroaching storm behind us. As Greta continued to search her book, I noticed Klaus had closed his eyes, his lips moving in what appeared to be silent prayer. The words I caught didn't sound like any prayer I'd ever heard, though. They were in a language far older, far stranger. Suddenly, Klaus's eyes snapped open. "There," he said, pointing to a dirt road barely visible in the gathering gloom. "Turn there, Hans." "Are you insane? That leads back towards the woods. We need to go to town, to people." "Trust me," Klaus insisted, his voice carrying an authority I'd never heard before. "That road will take us where we need to go." Perhaps it was the desperation of our situation, or perhaps some part of us recognized the ring of truth in Klaus's words. Whatever the reason, Hans wrenched the wheel, sending us bumping down the narrow dirt track. As we plunged deeper into the forest, the canopy above us grew thicker, blocking out what little light remained. The storm seemed to recede, but the oppressive feeling of being watched, of being hunted, only intensified. After what felt like hours, but could have only been minutes, we emerged into a small clearing. At its center stood a decrepit church, its spires listing dangerously to one side. "Stop here," Klaus commanded, already reaching for the door handle before Hans had fully put on the brakes. We piled out of the vehicle, the silence of the forest pressing in around us. No birds sang, no insects chirped. It was as if all of nature was holding its breath. "Klaus, what is this place?" He didn't answer immediately, instead striding purposefully towards the church's weathered doors. "A sanctuary, or perhaps our only hope." As we approached, I noticed some strange symbols carved into the wood of the door, sigils and runes that seemed to shift and change when viewed at different angles. Klaus placed his hand on the center of the door, murmuring words in that same ancient language he had used earlier. With a groan of protest, the wood and rusted metal swung open. The interior of the church was not what I had expected. Instead of pews and an altar, the vast space was filled with bookshelves, stretching from floor to ceiling. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light that seemed to have no visible source. At the far end, where a crucifix might hang, there was an enormous stained glass window depicting a scene of cosmic chaos, swirling galaxies, eldritch entities, and at the center a blazing eye that seemed to stare directly into my soul. "Welcome to the sanctum of the cosmic sigil," Klaus said, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. Greta gasped, her eyes wide with recognition. "I've heard whispers of this place, a repository of forbidden knowledge, guarded by those who stand watch against the great old ones." Hans, for once, seemed at a loss for words. He wandered to the nearest bookshelf, running his fingers over the spine of an ancient tome. "This is impossible." "I'm afraid it's all too real. And now, my friends, we have a choice to make. We can walk away from this and try to forget what we've seen, or we can take up the mantle of the vigil and stand against the darkness that threatens to consume our world." As if in answer, a tremor ran through the building. The stained glass windows blazed with an inner light, and I could have sworn I saw the great eye blink. "I don't think walking away is an option anymore," I said, surprised by the steadiness of my voice. "Whatever's out there, whatever has awakened, it's not going to stop coming for us, or for anyone else." Greta nodded firmly. "Wilhelm's right. We have a duty to use what we've learned to fight back." We all turned to Hans, the eternal skeptic. He stood silent for a long moment, conflict clear on his face. Then, with a resigned sigh, he nodded. "I suppose if we're going to face cosmic horrors, we might as well do it with the best resources available." Klaus smiled, but it was a grim expression. "Then let us begin. We have much to learn and precious little time." As Klaus led us deeper into the sanctum, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were crossing a threshold from which there was no return. Our lives as simple ghost hunters were over. We were embarking on a new path, one fraught with danger beyond imagining. But as I looked at my companions, Hans the skeptic turned believer, Greta, her family's arcane knowledge finding new purpose, and Klaus, the man of faith who had kept earth-shattering secrets, I felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever horrors awaited us in the vast, uncaring cosmos, we would face them together. The ghost hunters had evolved. No longer mere hunters of ghosts, we were now guardians against forces that threatened the very fabric of reality. Our war against the darkness had truly begun, and the fate of the world hung in the balance. As we delved into the ancient texts and eldritch artifacts of the sanctum, preparing for battle, one thought echoed in my mind. The hunt continues, but the stakes have never been higher. As we immersed ourselves in the arcane knowledge of the sanctum, days blurred into weeks. The outside world seemed to fade away, our existence narrowing to the dusty tomes and eldritch artifacts that surrounded us. Each revelation brought new horrors, but also new understanding. Hans, once the voice of skepticism, now pored over quantum theory texts, alongside grimoires of forbidden magic, muttering about the thin line between science and sorcery. Greta's expertise in occult history found a new depth as she uncovered connections between ancient cults and cosmic entities that spanned millennia. Klaus guided us through the sanctum's secrets, his past as a former priest taking on new significance with each passing day. I found myself drawn to prophecies, cryptic verses, and maddening visions that hinted at the greater conflict to come. It was in one such text, a crumbling papyrus written in a language that predated human civilization, that I found our first real lead. Listen to this. When the stars align and the veils grow thin, the hunger that waits beneath the world shall reach forth. Its tendrils shall grasp at the threads of reality, and the tapestry of existence shall begin to unravel. Klaus looked up from the star chart he'd been studying, his face grave. That sounds unsettlingly familiar to what we witnessed. Greta nodded, leafing through her own notes. The alignment. There's a rare celestial event coming up, a convergence of planets that only happen once every 1,000 years. And let me guess, Hans interjected, his voice tinged with grim humor. It's happening soon. 3 days from now, Greta confirmed. A heavy sigh fell from all of us. The entity we had encountered, this hunger that waits beneath the worlds, had only been testing the boundaries of our reality. The true invasion was yet to come. We need to go back, I said, words tasting like ash in my mouth. Back to that battlefield. It's a weak point, a nexus where the barriers between worlds are already strained. Klaus nodded solemnly. Agreed, but we can't go in unprepared like last time. We need to gather allies, weapons, anything that might give us the edge. As if in response to his words, a section of bookshelf swung open, revealing a hidden chamber. Inside, illuminated by an otherworldly glow, was an arsenal unlike anything I had ever seen. Ancient swords inscribed with runes of power, firearms that hummed with barely contained energy, amulets and talismans from a dozen different centuries, all radiating a palpable aura of protection. The Vigil has been preparing for this moment for centuries, Klaus explained as we stared in awe. We are not the first to stand against the darkness, nor will we be the last. But we may be the last line of defense for our world. As we began to arm ourselves, a thought occurred to me. What about the local authorities, the government? Surely they must have noticed something by now. Hans laughed bitterly. Oh, I'm sure they have, but what could they do against something like this? No, it's better they remain ignorant. Mass panic would only make our job harder. Over the next 2 days, we prepared as best we could. Greta worked tirelessly on protection wards and banishing rituals. Hans modified our ghost hunting equipment, infusing it with eldritch energy we scarcely understood. Klaus reached out to his contacts in the Vigil, calling in every favor he could to gather what allies were available on such short notice. I delved deeper into the prophecies, searching for any clues, any weaknesses we could exploit against the cosmic horrors that threatened our world. As the hours and the alignment drew near, we made our way back to Virginia. The countryside seemed unchanged, peaceful enough, but we all felt the wrongness that permeated the air. Reality itself seemed to bend and warp around the old battlefield, like space folding in on itself. We set up our equipment in a rough circle around the spot where the vortex had first appeared. Allies from the Vigil, a motley crew of scholars and warriors and mystics from around the globe, took up positions at key points, ready to lend their strength to whatever ritual we might need to perform. As the planets began to align, the air grew thick with tension. The sickly green light that we had come to dread began to pulse beneath the earth, growing stronger with each passing moment. "Whatever happens," I said to my companions, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me, "it has been an honor to stand with you." Greta squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with determination. Hans nodded grimly, his customary skepticism replaced by steely resolve. Klaus smiled, a look of peace settling over his features. "We stand now at the threshold, guardians against the darkness, sentinels against the void. Whatever horror may come, we face it together for the sake of all we hold dear." As if in response to his words, the ground began to split open. The vortex of green energy erupted skyward, tearing a hole in the very fabric of reality. Through that hole, we caught our first glimpse of the hunger that waits between worlds. It was vast beyond comprehension, a writhing mass of tentacles and eyes and mouths that seemed to extend infinitely in all directions. As it began to push into our world, I felt my sanity straining at the seams. But we had come prepared this time. As one, we raised our weapons, channeling our energies, and began the ritual that would determine the fate of the world. The battle for reality itself had begun, and we, the ghost hunters, stood as humanity's last desperate hope. The cosmic entity surged forward, its countless appendages lashing in all directions. The air filled with an otherworldly shriek that threatened to shatter our eardrums and break our minds. But we held firm, our protective wards flaring to life as they absorbed the brunt of the assault. Greta's voice rose above the chaos, chanting words of power that seemed to make the air vibrate. Hans directed bursts of modified electromagnetic energy at the creature, causing sections of its vast form to ripple and distort. Klaus stood at the center of our formation, his arms raised, channeling the combined might of the Vigil through ancient artifacts that we had brought from the sanctum. And me, I found myself locked in a mental battle with the entity itself. As our allies fought to contain its physical form, I grappled with its alien consciousness, trying to find some weakness, some way to drive it back. Images flashed through my mind, entire worlds consumed, civilizations rising and falling in the blink of an eye, the cold, uncaring vastness of a universe far longer and more terrifying than we had ever imagined. But among the cosmic horrors, I caught a glimpse of something, a pattern, a rhythm, an underlying structure of reality itself. "A resonance," I shouted. "We need to match its frequency." Understanding dawned on Hans's face. He quickly adjusted our equipment, turning it to the cosmic frequency I had glimpsed in my mental struggle. The air around us began to hum, a counterpart to the maddening shrieks of the entity. As our energies aligned, I felt a surge of power unlike anything I had ever experienced. For a brief, eternal moment, we were connected, not just to each other, but to the very fabric of the universe. Through that connection, we pushed back against the hunger that waits between worlds. The entity recoiled, its vast form beginning to collapse in on itself. The vortex of energy that had torn open reality started to shrink, drawing the cosmic horror back into whatever nightmare realm it had emerged from. Our victory, though, was not without cost. As the last of the entity was pulled back through the closing portal, I saw Klaus crumble, blood trickling from his nose and ears, the strain of channeling so much power taking its toll. "Klaus!" Greta cried out, rushing to support him. He smiled weakly, his eyes unfocused. "It's done. The barrier is sealed, but not forever. It will try again." As Klaus slumped into Greta's arms, the last of the otherworldly energy dissipated. The battlefield fell silent, the only sound our ragged breathing and the faint moans of the wounded. We had won, for now. The immediate threat was contained, but as I looked at my exhausted companions, at the allies who had fought beside us, I knew that our war was far from over. The hunger that waits between worlds had been driven back, but not destroyed. And there were other threats out there, other cosmic horrors waiting for their chance to break through reality. As the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, I made a silent vow. We would recover, we would learn, and we would grow stronger, for we were no longer simple ghost hunters, tracking down local legends and restless spirits. We had become something more, guardians of reality, sentinels against the darkness that lurked between the stars. And our hunt, our endless vigil would continue, for the sake of our worlds and all worlds that might exist beyond our understanding. We would stand ready, always watching, always fighting, always hunting the horrors that lurked just beyond the veil of our fragile reality. The sun rose on a world that had no idea how close it had come to annihilation, and in the growing light we began to plan our next move in a war that might never truly end. In the days that followed our confrontation, the true cost of our victory became painfully clear. Klaus, weakened by the immense energy of the channeling, slipped away peacefully in his sleep. His sacrifice had sealed the breach, but at the ultimate price. We weren't the only ones to suffer losses. Many of our allies from the Vigil fell in battle, their names to be honored in the secret annals of our organization. Greta, overcome with grief at the horrors that she had witnessed, chose to sequester herself in a remote monastery, seeking solace in ancient texts and meditation. Hans, ever the scientist, threw himself into studying the artifacts and knowledge that we had gathered, but the strain proved too much for such a rational mind. I received word that he had been institutionalized, his brilliant intellect shattered by truths that no human was meant to comprehend. As for me, I couldn't simply walk away. The things I had seen, the knowledge I now possessed, they were burdens, but also a responsibility. I took up Klaus's mantle, working to rebuild the Vigil, to prepare for future incursions. Years passed. The world spun on, blissfully unaware of the sacrifice made to keep it safe. I grew older, wearier, but never let my guard down, for I knew the truth. Our victories had been temporary. The cosmic horrors were patient, eternal. They could afford to wait. On the 10th anniversary of our battle, I returned to that Virginia field. The scars of our conflict had long since faded, nature reclaiming the land. As I stood there, remembering fallen friends and the weight of secrets, I felt a familiar tremor in the air. A faint green glow began to emanate from the ground, pulsing like a distant heartbeat. The hunger that waits beneath the worlds had not forgotten us. It was testing the barrier once again, probing for weakness. I sighed, feeling the weight of years and knowledge pressing down upon me. This was to be my life now, an eternal vigilance against threats beyond imagination. As I reached for my phone to alert the vigil, I allowed myself a grim smile. The hunt, it seemed, would never truly end, but as long as I drew breath, as long as there were those willing to stand against the darkness, humanity would have a fighting chance. Perhaps, in the great cosmic scheme of things, that was victory enough. With one last look at the peaceful fields that belied its true nature, I turned and walked away. There was work to be done, preparation to be made, for the next battle in our secret endless war loomed on the horizon, and I would be ready. When my grandfather passed away during an early winter, my family scrambled to rid the house of his belongings before the first major storm. The asphalt shingle roof of his one-story home was collapsing inward after years of neglect, and most of the windows were boarded up with cheap plywood. Instead of paying for the repairs, my parents decided to leave the fate of the quaint little abode up to Mother Nature. It was the first time we had visited since they relocated my grandfather to a nursing home, but the place somehow looked the same as it had when he lived there. We found the house stocked with canned food, furniture, machine parts, and old magazines that he had accumulated over the years, along with manila folders full of recipes and tax returns. After a week of boxing and disposing, only the floorboards remained. "I don't know why you're filming this," my girlfriend Sasha said, as we entered what was the living room, carrying 2 cardboard boxes. "I mean, there's nothing left, not even that stray tabby that he used to feed." "Groucho?" I replied with a silent laugh. I held my phone horizontal to the plaster wall and zoomed in on the floral wallpaper. I doubt he's alive anymore, and I don't know, it's kinda nice to imagine the way things looked when my grandparents first moved in. "I guess so, but are you really gonna put it on your channel?" "Maybe. It is abandoned, and we haven't uploaded anything in a while." "Yeah, Sasha exhaled and bit her lower lip, placing the boxes by the doorway to the kitchen area. "He bought this place with the money he received from his GI Bill, right?" "Sure did. Hey, you think we can do a segment on the Nike missile base? It's only about a mile away from here. The military built it back in the 50s, and..." "Jordan," she said, placing a firm hand on my wrist, "you know I hate to burst your bubble, but I don't really care. Not today, I'm sorry. I have class early tomorrow, and your parents just want us to pick up the stuff that's lying around. Grad school is taking over your life lately. Do you even want to make videos anymore?" She shrugged and sauntered into the adjacent room. Apart from the vinyl floor tiles and the storage closet, the kitchen looked unrecognizable. Not even an imprint of a stove, furniture, or cupboard remained. As Sasha opened the closest door, she signaled me towards a crumpled newspaper clipping that lay in the middle of the shelf next to a dusty can of Spam. Sasha carefully unraveled the paper, revealing 3 black and white images of hunters with captions scrawled across the bottom. In one of the images, a group of men wearing wool pants and red checkered jackets posed against a forest backdrop. The image underneath depicted a man aiming his rifle at a cat-like creature that stood on a dirt mound with a pointed triangular set of ears and an arched back. "Don Wakefield takes aim at the dreadful Glawacus? I didn't know your grandfather was a hunter. Look at that thing. It's so hideous that it's sort of adorable. I don't know about those eyes, though. I've never heard of what is it? I think it's pronounced Glaucus. At least, that's how I read the name on an urban legend website once. I had no idea that it was actually a thing, though." Sasha adjusted her braided brown hair and flipped the paper over. The words "local hunter search for a livestock-killing beast" preceded the brief blurb about my grandfather and fellow hunters chasing after a creature they called the Glaucus. The author dismissed the idea as hogwash, and suggested that the so-called dreaded Glaucus was a fisher cat, marten, or another animal of some stature. The locals apparently dismissed the men, too, but were concerned about their livestock and pets being attacked. Well, at least the story is somewhat legit, unlike that insane asylum you dragged me to. Are you actually disappointed by this? Maybe a little, I said, scratching my elbow. I always saw him as a cranky old man who thought the government was going to take his guns. Now he's a cranky old man who didn't know the difference between a monster and a common fisher cat. Then again, doesn't really look like one. I placed the article and my phone in the pocket of my bomber jacket and continued to search the remaining rooms. I found it odd that my grandfather believed in this creature, considering his attitude towards other paranormal entities. When my cousin and I told ghost stories around the campfire, he grumbled at us to stop being twits and stumped out the fire with his work boots. He also thought Halloween was a pointless holiday and turned the lights out when the trick-or-treaters roamed the neighborhood. Unlike many men and women of his generation, he wasn't religious either. He preferred the idea of rotting in the ground to spending eternity with his wife. We explored the other rooms of the house, but discovered nothing more than a few loose envelopes, a stale bag of M&Ms, and an empty toolkit in the garage. By the time we made our way to the backyard patio, the surrounding neighbors had dimmed their lights to a dull glow. Snow seemed to engulf the forest beyond us and obscure the path my cousin and I took to our tree fort. Sasha put her hand on my shoulder as I inhaled deeply and stared into the smoke cloud that filled the air. As Sasha turned in the direction of the house, I was unable to move. Even though we had thoroughly rummaged through the interior, there was still so much more that I wanted to find. My grandfather lived his life in predictable, clockwork fashion. His hunt for the Glaucus was far removed from the man I knew and the stories that he told. I know this isn't easy for you. It's not just that. The whole Glaucus story doesn't make any sense. It's not him at all. My mom said he never believed in anything supernatural. Even after he lost a son, he said he didn't want to hear anything about him being in a better place, and he's just dead. I don't think it necessarily has to make sense. I know, but this whole Glaucus thing, it really doesn't make any sense. It doesn't have to make sense right now. When my uncle died, we learned he had a whole family we never knew about, paid money to keep them quiet about it. My grandpa wasn't like that, though, I said, rubbing the back of my neck. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a gray striped cat limping underneath a towering evergreen. As it moved through the snow, its left hind leg trembled violently. Hey, I think that's Groucho. Did Groucho have one yellow eye and one blue one? I nodded and bent down to tighten my shoelace. Sasha whispered the word "don't" with a slight raspiness. Groucho's eyes shined in the light of the night, but the lingering shadows prevented me from seeing if he had any noticeable cuts or scars. The temperature was dropping rapidly. Left alone, Groucho would likely freeze or succumb to his injuries. He can't survive out here. If we leave him like this, he's easy prey. We need to take him to an animal hospital. I hadn't a clue where the nearest animal hospital was, but I remembered how to approach and hold him by crouching down low and gently grabbing the underside of his belly. The closer I walked, though, the more his eyes widened and his tail stiffened. When I came within a few feet of the cat, he began to scamper, propelling himself forward with his 3 abled legs. It was still too dark to see his injuries. Knee-deep in the snow, I extended my arm towards the cat. Just as my fingertips grazed his fur, Groucho fixed his claws and began to whimper. I stroked his fur slowly and moved my fingers towards the markings on his hind leg. There were several of them, each about a 1/4 inch deep. Something mauled him, I called out. Can you help me calm him down? He's shaking. Sasha shook as well upon approaching Groucho, her face turning white like the snow beneath him. She stroked his chin as I attempted to blot the wound with the sleeve of my jacket. This only caused the cat to whimper in a higher pitch taking quick breaths. As I continued to blot, Sasha carefully lifted him from the ground. He squirmed for a few moments before settling into her arms. She carried him around the house and into the driveway, which was illuminated by the headlights of my Chevy. I could see the markings more clearly now, and the thick gray clumps of fur that scattered about the area. "There's an animal hospital on Grove Street. It's like 5 minutes away," Sasha said, trying her best to hold the cat against her chest. He squirmed and howled despite her soft strokes around his chin. "Can you take him? He's really squirmy, and you probably know how to hold him better than I do." I grabbed, but before I could grab the underside of his belly, Groucho fell loose from her hands and scampered through the snow. He had learned to run with the limp, his 3 good legs carrying him back towards the evergreens. The moment I started chasing him, the cat picked up speed and darted between 2 trees, letting out another howl, which was longer and more painful. Sasha looked at me and motioned for me to run after him. I ran full sprint into the opening of the forest, but found nothing but his paw prints embedded in the snow. I wanted to follow the paw prints, but without a flashlight or suitable battery life on my phone, there was no use. "Maybe we could call animal control or something," she said, when she finally caught up to me. I shook my head. I was panting pretty heavily. "I don't think they'll do anything. I called animal control to get him before. They said they would come out and take a look, but they never did. He's injured, though. It's not safe out here. Trust me, Sasha. I know, but I also know they won't come. If we want to find Groucho, we have to do it ourselves." Sasha gave me a long, vacant stare, wrapping her arms tightly around her chest. She started to open her mouth to say something and then paused. Sasha was too tired and cold to argue with me about making brash decisions. We had had this discussion many times, whether it was about breaking into an abandoned building or sneaking into a supposedly haunted location. Sasha always argued first, but reluctantly followed. "You don't have to come along, you know. Don't even start with that. Let's go." Under her breath, she muttered something along the lines of, "I'm not doing this for you." Using the flashlight on our dying phones, we followed the narrow path into the forest, lined with jagged stones and twigs that jabbed at our shoes as we trudged through. Many moons ago, my grandfather told me that the path led to the town square. Over time, it had become overgrown and naturally sealed off from civilians. On occasions, my cousin and I attempted to find out where the path led to. We found only a few farmhouses, but felt oddly disoriented the whole time, not knowing which way to come from to go back. We spent hours in those woods, but not by our choosing. The further we walked, the fainter Groucho's footprints became, before they disappeared entirely. The last set of footprints gave no indication of direction. They simply vanished. Through the tree line, we could see acres of farmland. We figured Groucho might be darting towards the farmland for refuge. Many of my grandfather's neighbors, including the dairy farmers that lived behind him, knew of Groucho since he had stumbled onto their property for sustenance and shelter more than once. They would feed him and let him rest on their front porch or behind their house until he went along his way. Groucho must have been in his teens, as I remembered encountering him sometime in early high school. As we pushed through the evergreens onto the property, Sasha froze and pointed to a figure a few yards in front of us. "Oh my God, that's..." In the middle of the pasture lay a mangled body, that of a brown cow. The cow was torn at its abdomen, blood filtering into its coat, trickling up to its neck and down its tail. The hole was about the size of a medium watermelon. Sasha screamed and shivered. I bent forward and vomited into the snow, shivering too. "The cow, Jordan. Oh my God," she said, still pointing, ugly tears drenching her face. Sasha started to walk towards the cow, and I grabbed her by the waist. "Don't approach it. We don't know if what attacked it is still around. Don't get any closer." "Then what do we do, Jordan?" We stood there for the next few minutes, not knowing what to do. We just held each other, like we hadn't in a long time. Sasha sobbed. I pulled her in close and struggled to think of something to say. By now, I hoped Groucho had retreated far enough away from whatever was out here. In the distance, a single-story white farmhouse had its front porch lights on. "We should probably let them know," I said. "I really don't know what else to do." "Yeah," she said softly, still clinging tightly to me. We made our way up a tall hill to the farmhouse. We couldn't help but look back at the mangled cow a few times, just to confirm what we had seen. I wondered why the cow was outdoors in the dead of winter. I wondered what got it. The description of the livestock-killing beast from the newspaper clipping crossed my mind, but it seemed too coincidental. I wanted badly to say out loud what I was thinking, but looking at Sasha's pale complexion, I knew it was neither the time or the place. Once my roommate and best friend Zach told me that I let what I read about influence my thinking too much. Sasha made the same observation. They weren't wrong. I once thought my apartment was haunted after watching several hours of ghost hunting shows. I wanted to believe in the supernatural more than I ever had evidence for. Still, I couldn't help but think about that cat-like creature with the pointed ears tearing at the cow's flesh and Groucho's leg. If my grandfather, a lifelong skeptic, went after the creature with an entire squad, there had to be something to it. We reached the farmhouse, and Sasha was still pale and shaking. I was too. On the front steps of the house, I hesitated to press the doorbell, scanning the area for any sight of Groucho or another cow. When I finally pressed it, a few moments passed before a meaty arm opened the door. The man who opened it towered over the two of us, wearing blue jeans and a white t-shirt that barely hid his massive figure. The man stood there, arms folded, and blinked a few times. "I'm sorry to bother you, sir." I knew by the tone of my own voice that I would fumble over my words. "We were looking for our cat, and well, it's not our cat, but a cat we used to know, and we saw one of your cows through the woods, and..." "The hell are you doing on my property?" he said coldly, still blinking as if trying to wake up. "Wait, aren't you Don's grandson?" I stared blankly at him and nodded. Sasha clung tightly to my arm. "How did you know?" "My name's Nick. I used to bring eggs and meat to him. He had pictures of you and your mom and used to talk about you all the time. But what the hell are you doing here, and what the hell are you doing out so late?" "We were following Groucho." "The hell is a Groucho?" "Do you remember that stray cat that used to visit him?" "Maybe. He used to come around, and my grandpa used to feed him. He came around tonight and was injured. His leg was mauled or something. We tried to help him and ended up chasing him here." The man grunted and took a few steps out onto his porch. Then, staring out into the distance, his eyes widened. I could see the color draining from his large forehead. With his fists clenched and his veins pulsing in his neck, he started down the hill. We looked at each other, trembling a little too, and followed. When he reached the carcass, he bent over and glared for what seemed like an eternity. The longer he stared, the more color drained from his face. We stood a careful distance away from him and the cow. "This isn't the first time," he spoke in a gruff voice, almost whispering. "My cows were attacked years ago, but not like this." "What did it?" When Sasha asked this in the same tone, the man turned to look at her, gave her a half smile, and sighed. "I'm so sorry this happened to you." "There are coyotes and wolves out here, sometimes bears. Could have been anything, really. It's my fault, though, for not letting all the cows in." "What about the Glaucus?" The words escaped my mouth without much forethought. They were on the tip of my tongue. Sasha nudged me in the ribs, and I said, sorry. The man contorted his lips and then let out a heavy laugh of surprise. "Haven't heard of that one in years. I'm surprised your grandpa told you that old story. He wasn't too proud of it." "He didn't, actually. We found an old article about him. How did you..." "My father was part of the squad that hunted that creature sometime in the 30s. It's just a marmot or something, but it scared the hell out of the whole town." But how do you know for sure? Sasha nudged me again. I'm sorry, my boyfriend believes in all this supernatural crap. The man shook his head and smiled. I don't, but that's okay. A lot of people around here believe in it. Why was my grandpa not proud of it? The man shrugged. Hard to say. I don't remember much, but I think a lot of people were upset with them for starting trouble. Also, sometime in the 70s, a friend of your grandpa's led another expedition. A couple of kids got lost. Wait, what? Look, like I said, I don't remember much. There was a man in the group, Arthur Hines. He took a couple of kids to search for the Glaucus, and all but one returned. Arthur said they went off without him. Your grandfather defended him, and a lot of people in town weren't happy, especially when he got off. Your grandpa didn't speak much about it. Your dad didn't say much about it either. Does any part of you believe? The man clasped his hands together and bowed his head. I couldn't tell whether he was sobbing or deep in thought, but he stayed this way for a moment before speaking. I want to. My father definitely believed, and your grandfather did too. After what happened with Arthur, they were quiet about it. My grandfather didn't believe in anything paranormal. I felt myself shaking as I said it. Doesn't matter anyway, but if he believed in it, I think I should take that as a sign. Even though Sasha was behind me, I could sense her shake of the head and quieted. Go ahead. The man knelt down and tended to the cow. I gotta take care of this. It's getting cold. You should get yourself home. We understand, Sasha said, grabbing hold of my jacket. As we made our way back to the woods, the large man gave us a wave. Sasha was still shaking her head. What? What is it? What's your problem? Nothing. You were just kind of selfish. Selfish? How? Really, Jordan? This poor farmer's cow gets attacked, and you make it all about you and your stupid Glaucus. I know you just lost your grandpa, and you're going through a really tough time right now, but can't you see what's in front of you? We should have offered to help him. This is his livelihood. You don't seem to care much, though, do you? You don't get it, Sasha. I do care. I care enough to realize that what's happening to that poor man's cow is the result of what my grandpa was looking for all those years ago. What happened to Groucho was too. Do I know for sure? No, but I know that the marks on Groucho and the mauling on that cow isn't the work of some coyote or bear. I'm done with your stupid urban legend crap for the day. Let's go back to the car. What about Groucho? You saw what happened to that cow. She sighed and kicked at some snow with her shoe. Groucho's the only happy thing I have to remember my grandpa by. That can't be true. It is true. If he dies, it feels like I'm losing that last memory of my grandfather. We stood in silence together and struggled to find our words. A miserable breeze passed between us. We shivered and started ahead for the long path ahead of us. Further down, we couldn't see any lingering lights from the nearby houses. The path ahead was consumed by darkness. I stared into Sasha's honey brown eyes for a long while before she whispered the words, "Okay," and started down the path. I grabbed the back of her shoulder. She stopped and looked up at me and smiled. Then she placed a cold, trembling hand in mine. You know, I don't want to take anything away from you, right? I know. It's just always seems to be like this with you. Every trip we go on, every abandoned place we enter, every moment we interact, it's on a ghost trip or an orb on your phone. You're so invested, and I wish I could be. I wish I could be as emotionally invested as you are. This is different. If you say so. I shrugged, and we continued down the path. I called out Groucho's name a few times, but I only heard the echo of my own voice carry off into the night. Sasha and I came to a point where a large metal fence blocked off the end of the path. The metal sign read private property. On the other side, I saw the cat in a small bank of snow. Groucho was pawing at the fence with his good paw, and his mangled one was buried a few inches in. "Jordan, he looks really bad. Can you get him?" I'm gonna try. I don't want to startle him." I knelt down in the snow. He stared at me with his mismatched eyes. He was purring loudly. I didn't know if he was purring because he was happy to see me, hurt, or a little bit of both. I poked a finger through the small hole in the fence and touched the pink beans on his paw. He didn't move. He rubbed his cheek against the fence. "I'm not gonna let anything happen to you, okay, boy?" It was a promise I didn't know if I'd be able to keep, but at that moment I didn't care. "Sasha, come to where I am and pet him. I'm going to try to climb the fence." She nodded. She knelt down to where I had poked 2 fingers through the fence. With my eyes on the small cat, I stuck my fingers through the rings on the fence and began to climb. Though it stood only 4 feet from the ground, I made sure to climb slowly as Groucho started to rub his cheek against Sasha's fingers, tilting his head and closing his eyes. As I launched myself over the fence, I heard something howl in the distance, only it was more like a screech than a howl. Groucho's eyes widened, tail puffy and enlarged, and he darted to the right of the fence and into the woods. "You have to climb the fence, Sasha. We have to find him." "Jordan, that sounds like a coyote. We could get hurt." I was convinced it wasn't, but I knew arguing with Sasha would be pointless, so I gestured for her to climb over. From the pocket of my jeans, I pulled out a black switchblade. I turned the knob on the handle, revealing the blade. Sasha groaned and shook her head. "Oh God, why do you have a switchblade on you? You've been dating me for how many years?" "I've had it since I was in Eagle Scouts." "Too many, apparently," she mumbled. "Do you think you're gonna have to defend yourself against the coyote with a switchblade? Groucho's clearly fast and good at hiding. We can go tomorrow." "He might be dead tomorrow, and that's not a... Forget it. Just climb over the fence." Reluctantly, Sasha climbed the fence. As she jumped, she tore part of the jacket on the jagged fence rings. I managed to grab a hold of her waist, but her weight, combined with the force of the fall, sent us both into the snowbank. The snow engulfed us, and before I could ask Sasha if she was okay, we heard the awful screeching reverberate through the forest. "It's a coyote, Jordan," she said, standing up and brushing snow off her. "Haven't you heard a coyote before?" "Yeah, but this is worse. A lot worse." We heard the screech again, a screech so awful it sliced my eardrums and churned my stomach. The screech, wherever it had come from and whatever it had come from, sounded like the screams of someone being tortured over and over again. This screech put the cries of a coyote to shame. What followed the screech was a combination of howls and hisses. "It's Groucho." "Jordan, with my knife still wielded, I darted into the forest, not knowing or caring at that moment if Sasha was following me. As I ran, I forced myself through the razor pine leaves and over serrated stone pieces that stabbed my sneakers. When my body hit a branch, I felt myself fall into the darkness and tumbled down a long hill. I tried to tuck my body, but the stones and fallen branches penetrated every inch of me on the way down. Halfway through my fall, I heard what sounded like Sasha screaming, or maybe it was the creature screaming. Then my body came to a hard stop against something solid. My body aching, I looked up at the stone, cracked bird bath that marked the property of a small brick house covered in moss. The house looked like it had been unoccupied for years. The windows had no blinds and reflected the total blackness from within. I brushed myself off and looked up towards the hill where I could see only rows of trees. I patted both pockets, realized I had dropped my phone somewhere on the hill. I could no longer hear anything beyond a cool breeze and some rummaging in the woods above. I had to find a way to call Sasha. I had no idea how far I had fallen or in which direction. I scanned the area to see if there were any other houses nearby. The brick house, however, was only surrounded by woods. As I ran towards the front of the house, the snow drenching my feet up to the ankles, which throbbed and felt like metal weights dragging me down with every step. To the right of the house, I saw a small figure standing with its back against the wall, looming in the shadows. Reluctantly, I stepped closer to see a dark-skinned boy wrapped in a wool coat, wearing a red ski cap. He looked no more than 8 or 9. I glanced at the window above the boy. They were filled with even more darkness than the others. The boy tilted his head in the opposite direction of me. His back was stiff, his hands were stiffer, his large brown eyes fixed on that spot in the distance that never wavered. He must have heard me, because he put a finger to his lips. "Can I—" "Shh. You'll scare it," he whispered, his voice small and trilly. "Scare what?" I knelt down to his level and lowered my voice. "What am I gonna scare?" "I forgot the name of it," he murmured, eyes still fixed on that spot. "Who told you about it?" "The man I'm here with." "What's his name?" I didn't have time to process what was happening in front of me. My first instinct was to protect the boy. I didn't know what I was protecting the boy from or from whom, but something told me he wasn't supposed to be here, and he wasn't safe. "Shh. What's your name?" "I forgot that too." Are you okay?" The boy looked down. I put an arm on his tiny shoulder. After a long time, he shook his head. Forgetting that I didn't have my phone on me, I tapped my pocket and swore under my breath. The boy smirked. "What's your name? Did he take you here?" Silence. I gripped the switchblade inside my pocket and looked over my shoulder at whatever he expected to come towards us. I couldn't leave him alone, but I didn't know what I could say to make him move. So I stared at the boy and continued making conversation. "Did he tell you about the Glaucus?" "Yeah," he said softly. The boy was breathing very heavily now. I was too. With 2 hands on his shoulder, I guided this boy toward me. He didn't resist. He didn't look at me, though, his eyes fixed on the snow. As interested as I was in the boy and what he might have to say about the Glaucus, the word "he shouldn't be here" played over and over again in my mind. The reality of the 8-year-old boy alone in the dead of the night and an old kidnapper made me absolutely nauseous and spiked my adrenaline. I was not going to leave his side. "I know you don't know me, but you're not safe here. My name's Jordan. My girlfriend and I are looking for a cat. I got lost and I found you. We can bring you—" He shushed me again and crouched low to the ground as the window to the house slammed open. I crouched down beside him and held him tightly. Clutching the blade in my pocket, I whispered for the boy to stay low as I rose to my feet. When I sprang up, the window slammed shut again. "He knows you're here. He said I got to look for it alone or it will get me. Listen to me. We're going to run as fast as we can towards those woods. That's where it comes from. He told me not to move." I swore again under my breath. This time, he did not smirk. He did not move. At that moment, the house lights flickered on. "We are going to run, okay?" He nodded and bit his lip. I grabbed his tiny hand, which was frigid. At that moment, I thought about running to the road, but wasn't certain where the road would lead to. I also wasn't certain that I could handle running full speed with an 8-year-old in the snow up the hill. When we started running, he tripped into the snow. "Where do you think you're going with my friend?" said a voice that carried from the house. The voice belonged to an elderly man, but seemed otherworldly the way it croaked and echoed. "Peter, don't go with that man. It's not safe in the woods." Mortified, I leaned my head to see an elderly man standing on the brick patio in front of the house. He was too far away to discern any facial features other than round and bald, but close enough to see the frail outlines of his skeletal figure draped in an oversized plaid shirt and black dockers. His body was so tiny that the wind would blow it away in a moment, Yet he stood there menacingly, his sagging lips curling into a smile. "My name's not Peter," the boy suddenly screamed, bouncing up from the snow. He grabbed tight onto my arm and squinted. I pulled out the switchblade from my pocket and flipped the blade outward. "There's no need to do that," the voice cried. Then his cries morphed into a menacing whisper that carried just as clearly. "Now, let my friend Peter go." "My name's not Peter," he shouted again. "It's Jonah, and you know it." "This is what's gonna happen." I felt my words and entire body tremble as I spoke. "Jonah is coming with me, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it." My words didn't faze the old man. He stood in the same stance, sagging lips and a mutated smile. "Don't go into the woods, Peter. My name is Jonah," he shouted again. "We're going to run now," I said quietly. When my eyes met his, I could tell by the way that they widened that he knew the graveness of the situation. "I'll be right behind you." As Jonah ran towards the opening in the woods, I stared back towards the house, my knife still drawn. The man was gone now, the house completely dark. I hesitated for a moment before I caught up with Jonah, who was standing at the foot of the hill, staring at the endless snow above us. Placing my switchblade back in my pocket, I knelt down towards him, asking if he wanted help getting up the hill. He nodded, then he climbed on my shoulders without hesitation, and I began to climb, holding tightly to his sneakers. The weight of the boy and the incline of the hill tired me quickly, but I pushed on, and with every passing sound, I held on tighter. When we were far enough up the hill and away from the house, I started to ask the boy some questions about how he was and how he was feeling, and most importantly, if he was going to be okay. He either said nothing at all or spoke with a brief yes or no to my questions. When I could see the top of the hill, I asked Jonah how he got there. "I don't know. I was sleeping, then I was in the house." I swallowed deeply and struggled to find my words. "When did you get there?" "Today, I think." Did he bring you there?" "I don't know. It was really dark, and he was really old and scary." "Can you think of anything about his name?" I asked. "He said to call him Mr. Eyes, I think, or Mr. Hayes or something." Wait, did he hurt you, Jonah?" "No, he was weird. He wanted me to look for the glocky thingy." The Glaucus? Why?" I asked. "I don't know. He said it was really cool and all the kids were looking for it." "Other kids?" "Yeah, other kids. He said there were other kids and they were looking for the glocky thingy. Then he started calling me Peter, but my name's not Peter. It's Jonah." "Did you see the other kids?" "No, he said they got lost looking for the glocky thingy and that I could find them. I was scared of it, though. I didn't want to look for it, but I didn't say anything." Although the hill was no longer in sight, the old man's voice carried from the bottom of it. "Peter, come back, Peter." "Don't say anything," I said, putting a finger to my lips and motioning for him to kneel next to me. "Peter, where are you, Peter?" he asked again. I could tell Jonah was suppressing his instincts to shout, "My name's not Peter," again, at the old man. He clenched his small fists by his side. A cold breeze blew over us. Underneath my legs, I felt something solid poking me beneath the leaves. It was my smartphone. The screen was cracked, its battery drained to 2%. 10 missed calls flashed across the screen from Sara. When I was sure the voice was out of range, I called her. "Jordan, where—" "Sasha," I said, lowering my voice immediately. "I need you to call the police, and I have a little boy with me. His name's Jonah. Send them to my—" Before I could finish my sentence, the phone screen drained to black. I reached my arm out to where Jonah would be, but he was gone. I sprang up and immediately screamed his name, turning around in a dizzying circle, not thinking of the old man or whether he would hear me or not. "Jonah! Jonah!" I screamed once more, breathing heavily. "Oh my God. Jonah, can you hear me?" Only the deafening silence of the wind answered my call. In the panicked moments, a memory came to me of the time I got lost in the woods behind Granddad's house when I was about Jonah's age. I remembered my granddad telling me to look for any light in the distance that looked like a house light. I wondered if Jonah had been told the same thing. With nothing left to lose, I started running towards a faint light that glimmered in the distance. I forced my aching body far enough up the hill until I actually saw the boy chasing a small, shadowy figure with a swooping tail. "Jonah, what are you doing? Stay right where you are." "It's the Glocky thingy! It's the Glocky thingy!" I felt my heart sink in my chest as the boy swooped down to grab the dark figure that stood no more than a couple of feet tall, with pointed ears and an arched back. "Jonah, don't touch that! Jonah!" As I sprinted the rest of the way towards him, I saw the boy lean down by Groucho, who was now even more scratched up than before, missing several patches of fur. He purred as the boy knelt down to pet him. "Oh, Jonah, that's a cat. He's very nice. His name's Groucho." "Are you sure? He's kind of ugly." "He's hurt. Never mind. This path. We're on the path that will lead us back." I picked up the wounded Groucho and held him over my shoulder with my left hand, and held Jonah with my other in his tiny grip. The three of us walked cautiously down the path until we saw Sasha looming in the distance. As soon as Sasha saw the three of us, she ran for us. Standing behind her was the farmer with his rifle in hand. Sasha threw her arms around me and Groucho, while Nick knelt down to check on Jonah. Sasha told me that police were on their way and that they thought they knew the name of the missing boy. Jonah was shaking, so was Groucho. John took off his jacket and put it on the boy, then threw a scarf at her to tend to Groucho's wounds. The cat was purring on my shoulder, but still visibly shaken. "Is your name Jonah Williams?" Nick asked the boy softly. The boy nodded and turned to us. "There was an Amber Alert out for him about a month ago. I don't know how he got all the way to Windsor. Jonah, do you know who took you?" The boy shook his head. "His name's Mr. Eyes." Nick's face drained a ghostly white. Do you mean Mr. Hines?" The boy nodded. "I thought he was..." "Oh God," Sasha whispered. "He called me Peter, but my name's not Peter. It's Jonah." "Is there anyone in your family named Peter?" Nick asked. The boy shook his head. "How about Pete?" Nick asked after a moment. I think I have a Grandpa Pete." The three of us exchanged the same wide-eyed look. "Does your grandpa have a last name?" Jonah nodded. "Pete was the only one who made it back from Arthur Hines's trip. He looked just like his grandson. He never said anything about what happened. The police couldn't get anything out of him, so Arthur got off." Nick couldn't say anything else before a swarm of police officers stormed our way with flickering lights. There were well over a dozen of them, and a few armed SWAT team members as well. A red-headed female officer escorted Jonah down the path. A male officer asked the three of us to come with him. In no time, the path behind my grandfather's house was full of police activity, and German shepherds barking in the distance. As we came within eyesight of the house, we saw squad cars lining the streets as well, and there were several news crew trucks too. Time moved in images too rapid for me to process, and by the look on Sasha and Nick's face, it seemed the same for them as well. The three of us waited for the officer by my grandfather's house, but he hurried back into the woods at the call of his name. In the driveway, the female officer let go of Jonah as he rushed into the arms of a man with long dreadlocks and a woman in a puffy brown coat. The family hugged and cried as the wintry mix fell over us. I stroked Groucho gently while Sasha wrapped an arm around my waist. We watched the police futile attempt to keep the news crews at bay by drawing caution tape over the end of the driveway. We stood in silence while the crews pushed their way towards the family, shouts and barks echoing increasingly in the distance. "So Pete never said anything?" I asked after a long time. "Not a thing," Nick said. "Who knows what that old creep did to him? Who knows what he saw?" For the rest of the night, one moment blurred into another. From the hours worth of questioning back at the station to the hours of waiting at the animal hospital for Groucho to get stitched up. For most of those moments we were silent. For the moments when we weren't, we listened to Nick's story of my grandfather and what little he knew about Arthur Hines. Arthur was the one who led my grandfather on the expedition all those years ago to find the dreaded Glaucus. Arthur was the one to convince him what they saw was really it. He was my grandfather's right-hand man, and my grandfather trusted him to a fault. What happened to the children was a shame too great for my grandfather to carry, a shame he never spoke of again. After our 15 minutes of local news fame, we barely spoke about it either. The officer never found Arthur Hines that night, or the house he lived in, despite the pleas from us and the Williams family to keep looking in the area. After a couple more months, they stopped looking altogether. The news coverage of the investigation died with the case file. We ended up giving Groucho to the family once he was fully healed. It provided them with a brief happiness, but eventually that happiness turned to bitterness when the public and the authorities forgot about the case altogether. Eventually, they stopped returning our calls and social media messages. Sasha and I didn't blame them. They were just sad there was nothing more that could be done. Our shared sadness carried through the spring until one day we received a phone call from Nick that he had found something on his farm. I woke up to screaming last night. There were awful coyote-like screams, even worse, followed by the chewing noises. They came down the path. Did you find anything? Yeah. When I got there, I found a pair of bloody dentures just lying in a fist-sized paw print, surrounded by a bunch of half-footprints from a boot or something. It was the weirdest thing I'd ever seen. It was like someone fell there, but there was nothing else or no one else there, except a few loose strands of silver hair. The first time Sasha got high, she stood face to face with a black bear in the backyard of her friend's house. She was giggling while her two best friends, Jade and Colt, stood behind her, absolutely terrified. She wasn't sure why this was her reaction or what other drugs those edible gummy bears had been laced with, but the bear looked adorable, standing on its hind legs and raising its snout in the air. "Don't scream," Sasha said while giggling. "It'll only provoke it. Where I grew up, we had bears in our woods all the time. If you don't move, it will go away eventually." "You're out of your mind," Colt snapped in a harsh whisper. "Hun, I don't think that's how it works," Jade said, her voice trembling. She was frantically searching through her phone. You're really high right now. I think you should do as this website says and back away slowly, or scream if it comes closer and throw things." "Scream and throw things at that?" Colt snapped in a harsh whisper. "You should call animal control, and we should never have come out here in the first place." "Colt, she's super out of it. Be nice," Jade tried to reason, still shaking. "Hun, try backing away really slowly. Colt, call animal control and the police. Maybe pick up something and throw it." Colt was shaking his head, muttering a string of swears under his breath. The bear looked absolutely massive compared to the 5-foot-tall Sasha, especially on its hind legs. For some reason, though, the furry black beast didn't seem threatened, as it wasn't even looking at the threesome. It was more interested in the injured bat that was flopping around on the solar-tiled roof of Jade's house. Sasha remembered only bits and pieces of her father's advice from long ago. "You guys need to calm down," Sasha insisted, not even trying to suppress a giggle. "You see something on the roof, boy? What is it?" "It's not a dog, Sasha," Jade said. "Back away. Colt, call animal control now." Sasha turned around and crossed her arms, not bothering to read her friend's expression. "You guys act like you've never seen a bear before. Good God." It's going back. It's... By the time Jade pointed in the direction of the bear, it had slipped into the narrow opening of the woods. As Colt and Jade breathed a sigh of relief, Sasha sat on the porch steps and reclined on them, her eyes fixed on the blurry, starry sky. There wasn't much she loved about Winstead, but she loved nights like this, even when she was drifting into a drug-induced sleep. That was way too close, Colt snapped. Sasha wasn't sure whether either of them were looking at her, but Colt's angry tone mixed with Jade's concerned tones weren't enough to sway her from her sleep. Maybe we should just leave her there, Colt remarked. She loves the wilderness, apparently. Come on, Colt. I don't want to hear the excuse that she's high again. She's the only one that ate 10 of them gummies. I feel bad that she's having trouble with Jordan again or whatever, but she made an ass out of herself tonight. I can hear what you're saying, and I don't care, Sasha remarked. You can leave me out here tonight. Jade laughed. No way, hun. If the bear comes back, the trail cam will get it. There's plenty of them in Winstead. You're not missing much. We're lucky to be alive, Colt said, ignoring Sasha's head shaking. Let's go inside and go to bed. Maybe when you wake up, you'll sound like your more rational self again and stop sounding like your boyfriend. That remark particularly bothered Sasha, but she said nothing as Colt and Jade led her inside the dismal home that Jade had rented out on the outskirts of Winstead. Even with the solar tiles the landlord fixed on the roof, the place was still a dump in Sasha's opinion, with mold stains all over the ceiling, boarded up windows, and a total lack of air conditioning. It didn't help that Colt was secretly living there and leaving garbage in every room. By the time Sasha stepped inside the dark guest room, the only room untouched by either of them, she was relieved. She was happy to lay down on the single olive-covered couch that fit snugly between two well-stocked bookshelves. Sasha took the night to sober up, tossing and turning on the barren cushions with broken springs. She couldn't stop thinking about how human the bear had looked, standing on its hind legs. She found nothing to fear about the bear, but thought about it with wonder. When Sasha was little, she remembered her mom telling her stories about the brown bears in the forests of Syria that greeted her as she walked through the woods and rubbed up against her dress. Her father, a lifelong New Englander, tried to explain in extremely cautious tones that it wasn't a typical experience. Sasha didn't listen, nor did she have any fear for bears. She always loved bears and still had the same sweatshirt of a brown bear from the time she was a teenager. High or not, she figured she probably would have approached the bear anyway. I didn't know being high could make you the damn crocodile hunter. Jesus Christ, she heard Colt say from the other room. Sasha's always been good with animals, Jade responded. With a tired laugh, they turned on the faucet in the kitchen. To Sasha, they sounded louder and closer than they actually were. She was starting to drift off when Jade continued. The bear was absolutely crazy, though. You mean terrifying, Colt interjected, pouring what sounded like a glass of water. High or not, that girl has no common sense and is turning more and more into her boyfriend every day. Sasha sighed. Ever since Jordan came into the picture, neither Colt or Jade were fans of him or his YouTube channel about abandoned and scary places. For the longest time, it was just Sasha, Jade, and Colt, three friends who met their freshman year at Northwestern Connecticut State University, a college not too far from this dump her friends called home. Her relationship had driven a wedge between them. Being high tonight was a way to take the edge off their complaining. If she wasn't so tired, she would have climbed out the window and went looking for that unusual bear. Hours later, when her friends were sound asleep and Sasha was still up and tormented by her thoughts, she saw a figure from the window. It looked tall, like the bear, but much blurrier. It was standing in the middle of the yard. Despite squinting, she couldn't quite make out what it was. It was dark, like the bear, but there weren't any discernible features like fur or ears. When she squinted harder, she saw a tall, gray-haired man just standing in the middle of the yard. He wore a long, open jean jacket over a flannel shirt and brown cargo jeans. When she saw his right hand gripping a metal shovel, she gulped and felt her heart sink into her throat. Without thinking, Sasha grabbed her cell phone and opened the window, shouting, "What are you doing here?" Those words startled the man. His big gray eyes widened and he darted off into the forest. When he ran, his body looked dark and blurry for some reason. Sasha figured that she must still be high, but was sober enough to go into the living room where Colt and Jade were dozing on separate couches. "Guys, wake up, I saw something." Colt and Jade were in their clothes from the night before. Only Jade's oversized hoodie and Colt's cardigan had some sort of food on it. When they opened their eyes, Colt saw Sasha and grimaced, and as for Jade, she furrowed her eyebrows. "What is it, Sash?" "I saw a man in the backyard, a tall man with long hair." As she spoke, Sasha still had a sinking feeling in her chest. It took a moment for her friends to process what she was saying, but once it hit them, they were both off the couch and at attention. "I called him from the window and he ran away." "Colt, go check the trail cams," Jade said with a nod. "That's crazy, Sash. My neighbors saw a crazy man like that a couple of weeks ago, but she said the cops didn't do anything. The trail cams will definitely pick him up, though." From a brown knapsack on the couch, Colt pulled out his laptop and opened up the trail cam application. They watched Colt as he fast-forwarded through hours of nothing. When the image of the three of them and the bear came on screen, Sasha felt the urge to giggle, but Colt's look of exasperation convinced her otherwise. "About what time was this?" Colt asked, scratching his chin. Before Sasha could answer, Colt paused on a frame of the bear on his hind legs. "Sash, I thought you said you saw a man." "I did. This very tall man with ridiculously long hair and a jean jacket." "Maybe you need to fast forward a little more. Wait, slow down." Colt nodded and pressed the gray button with a single black arrow. It was the same bear they'd seen earlier, just standing on its hind legs for what clocked at a solid 2 minutes. Then it appeared to look at the window for a split second before getting back down on all fours and darting off into the woods. Sasha's mouth dropped open and she took a step back. Jade sighed and Colt slapped his hand over his face. "Well, that's that, Sasha," Colt snarled. "You were so high you thought the bear was some mysterious jean jacket dude. That's a bad trip." "Oh, Sash, you had a real bad trip. I'm so sorry it scared you." "No, I know what I saw. Fast forward." "Wasn't this like 5 minutes ago? If I fast forward, there's nothing. Just a reminder that it's 4 in the morning and you're still high. I've been high before, but not enough to hallucinate. It's like they were peyote gummies or something, or maybe you're just crazy." Jade smacked him on the ear. "Ow! The hell, I was kidding. Maybe we all just need to go to bed." Knowing that she couldn't convince them otherwise, Sasha had gone to bed. She wasn't having a bad trip, but a bad time. Now, not only did her best friends disapprove of her relationship, but they questioned her sanity. Unlike her boyfriend, Sasha wasn't religious or spiritual and didn't really believe in the supernatural. She also knew the difference between tripping and being sober, or at least she thought she did. What she saw wasn't caught on camera, but without any evidence, she still believed. Being in the last year of her biology graduation program, the notion of believing was deeply unsettling to her. Despite her better instinct, Sasha called Jordan the next day and told him about her experience. "So let's review," Jordan said in a familiar voice that made Sasha groan. She didn't have to be there to know that he was grinning and pointing fingers in the air as if he had some brilliant idea. "The three of you saw a bear in Jade's backyard that was standing on its hind legs. Late on in the night, you saw a tall, long-haired man that looked like a sage or something. And the trail cams caught footage of a bear." Yeah, Sasha said, uncertain of where this was going, but not wanting to know. And Jade lives in Winstead, towards the woods. You know all this, Jordan. What's your point? There was a brief pause before Jordan blurted out, You had a visit from the Winstead Wild Man. Oh, God, Sasha groaned. Like their high school sports team mascot? Oh, no, that's the Winstead Wild Men. There's a slight difference. See, they get their name from a local legend of the Winstead Wild Man. It's like a Connecticut Bigfoot. As Sasha sank into the couch and let out another audible groan, she felt tempted to hang up and make an excuse about bad service as he continued. Matt Drake did a video on it. You should watch it. Okay, so legend has it that sometime in the late 1800s, there was a real proper selectman named Riley Smith who was picking berries with his dog. For some reason, like all men back then, he always wore a suit and a top hat, even when on a walk in the woods. But that's beside the point. Anyway, he saw a large creature that looked like a man, but with black fur all over his body and long hair draped over his shoulders. The selectman and his dog were paralyzed with fear and stood motionless till the creature disappeared. He reported this story to the Winstead Herald, and over the next few weeks, many locals reported sightings and the town panicked. That's actually an interesting story, Sasha said, scrunching up her nose, but I very much doubt that's what I saw. You believe in all this supernatural stuff. I respect that, I do, but how else can you explain it? Look, Sash, I gotta go unfortunately, but be careful out there and maybe buy bear spray or something. Sasha sighed. She loved her boyfriend, but not the way he looked for supernatural and everything. For a while, they had a YouTube channel where they explored abandoned places together. Ever since he met Matt Drake, however, he dragged Sasha on ghost hunts and cryptozoological searches around the state for creatures with weird names like the Glaucus or the Black Dog of Hanging Hill. Something about the Weston Wild Man intrigued her, though. At the very least, she found it strange that the camera footage picked up a bear, and not the mythological-looking figure she had seen. Maybe she was tripping. She'd accepted that explanation before Jordan's. That morning, Sasha continued searching the Winstead Wild Man on her phone, but she had no signal. Neither Colt or Jade had paid for the internet that month. They left a note on the counter that they had gone out grocery shopping, a typical Sunday morning for them. She started her Sunday morning walk into town. She found herself peering into each of her neighbors' backyards in search of a long-haired man or the bear. Every time she thought she saw something, it just turned out to be a shadow from the vast forest that surrounded the town, or another animal like a moose or a deer. She searched the town, high and low, for the man until the bells sounded in the church downtown. She felt her mind and eyes growing dreary as she aimlessly wandered until she reached the part of town that she did not recognize, that was lined up with old brick factories and buildings. The street was completely silent, the sound of passing traffic and birds and the crunch of falling leaves beneath her feet completely disappearing. The silence made her drowsy, so drowsy that she sat down on the curb in front of the large brick buildings that looked different from the rest of the factories, as if it was once a school or a town hall. The silence not only made her drowsy, but a mix of queasiness and extreme sadness. It became so silent that she thought of screaming, just to make sure that she could still hear. When she was ready to open her mouth and do so, she heard the sound of something scraping along the earth. Sasha turned around, knowing what she would see, way before she saw it. Those feelings of queasiness and sadness turned to absolute dread when she saw the long-haired man with the open jean jacket digging in the earth. What are you doing? Who are you?" she asked. She thought that she had been whispering, but the atmosphere was so quiet that the man not only turned around, but he brushed his hair out of his immense gray eyes and placed his shovel down. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bother you." "I'm looking for my friends," the man said, in a sharp, raspy voice. "Oh God, I should go. I'm sorry," Sasha whispered to herself. Sasha couldn't turn around, though. She was encapsulated by the deepness of the man's gray eyes. "I've been looking for them for a long time." His voice morphed into an echo that continued as he picked up the shovel and continued to dig. "What are you hoping to find?" Sasha felt her voice growing even smaller as she asked, already knowing the answer. "Where they buried my friends. I've been looking for so long." His voice echoed once more against the quietness of the atmosphere. The man wasn't looking at her. He was digging so intently that she thought he would break the shovel blade. "I have to find them." Who buried them? She almost couldn't believe she'd asked it. She wasn't sure she wanted to know. "What is this place?" The man continued on as if he hadn't heard her, throwing dirt every which way, causing Sasha to step back a few paces, but she was still unable to scream or run away. "Auskela ilaha." The man's voice boomed as he dug more intensely, and the words echoed once more. "Auskela ilaha." She could see the veins pulsating in his arms as he dug so deep into the earth that he created an opening big enough to be buried within. The man groaned and staked the shovel into the ground, turning around furiously to meet Sasha's eyes. "I've been looking for so long, ever since I went here." "Where's here?" "Johnson Indian Reform School," he said gruffly. Those words cut like a knife, and she felt a sharp pain in her head, followed by bright flashes. Sasha was overwhelmed by images of bare, dark-skinned children walking in straight lines and a dark-robed nun behind them with a whip. She saw images of a long-haired man as a young boy with the same shovel, digging into the earth and weeping loudly. Sasha saw the black bear standing on its hind legs and roaring at the sky. Then there was nothing but silence and complete darkness. When darkness was gone, she woke up on the curb of a completely different street that she now recognized. Sasha rose and looked around frantically to see a street filled with Sunday morning drivers and churchgoers. The buildings were gone. The silence was gone. The long-haired man was gone too. Now, even the slow sounds of Sunday morning in Winstead felt overwhelming. She looked at the church and it made her queasy. Either she wasn't well, or everyone around her was willfully ignorant of the horrific history that lurked within the town. Sasha wasn't sure what was worse, so she went back to Jade and Colt's house, too fright-sick to look in the backyard or take any shortcuts. "We tried to call you," Jade explained, as a pale-faced Sasha stumbled into the house. She threw her arms around Sasha and pulled her tight. "You need to learn to charge your phone, girl." "Yeah," Sasha murmured. Even Colt looked concerned, and was reading something on his phone. "Looks like you did something last night, Sash." He handed her his phone. It was a Silver Alert text about a man named Taron Morgan who had wandered away from a retirement facility about 24 hours ago. He was described as 6'5", with long silver hair. Sasha bit her lip, her hands shaking against her jeans. "I think you saw this guy. I'm not sure what he was doing in our backyard, but he's exactly how you described him. He's..." Those words were all Sasha managed to say before she sat on the couch. Colt and Jade suggested reporting what she saw to the local authorities. All she could do was nod. She felt too frightened to express what she had seen or to even rationalize it, even to Jordan, who would believe her at the drop of a hat. It wasn't until days later, when Sasha was back home, that she mustered the willpower to search for Johnson Indian Reform School. To her surprise and disappointment, she found the Foreign Mission School in Cornwall and the Moors Indian Charity School in Lebanon, but no combination of the words matching Johnson Indian Reform School. Perhaps the man she saw attended one of those schools, or was just old and confused. Perhaps she felt such an intense connection with him that she imagined what she had seen. Perhaps it was just an old man with dementia who mixed up stories from other family members or legends. Sasha searched as intensely as she saw the long-haired man digging that day, but no results were rendered. Perhaps it was best to just try and forget the disturbing images that she had seen and heard. No matter how hard she tried, Sasha couldn't forget about Tay and Morgan, the Johnson Indian Reform School, or anything else that she had seen. She stayed over at Colt and Jade's place as an excuse to search the neighborhood for the man or the street with the old factory buildings. The trouble was, Winsted had many streets with old factory buildings, but none of them were shaped like old schools or town halls. Colt and Jade asked where she would go when she walked, but she never said. Each time she tried, she heard Tay and Morgan's voice echoing, "I'm looking for my friends." Sometimes she felt the urge to help him. One time, the urge was so strong that she wanted to call the retirement facility and ask for him by name, but something stopped her. His name, his story, his figure felt too real and unreal simultaneously to make contact. One night at Colt and Jade's, many months after the encounter, she sat on the back porch, chewing an inordinate amount of gummies to her chagrin. It was the first time that Sasha was able to laugh and smile in a long time. But this time, Colt and Jade knew they couldn't stop her and just settled for the fact that she was happy and silly enough to joke around again. It was nice to join in on the silly conversation and make fun of Jordan and his crazy ghost adventures together. They were so busy sharing the gummies and staring at the stars that they hadn't even noticed the black bear that had come stumbling into the backyard, this time on all fours. "Oh my God," Colt said, tensing up and whispering sharply, "Sasha, be real quiet and don't do anything." "Yeah, Sash," Jade said, grabbing her by the shoulder. "Please don't do anything stupid. Hey, what's that in its mouth?" The bear had something white and pointy in his mouth that was rounded on its end. Sasha's jovial mood turned into one of complete silence as she stared at the pointy figure and into the bear's gray eyes. She hadn't looked into the bear's eyes the first time she saw it. Now Sasha sat quietly until the bear seemed to nod at them and slip into the narrow opening of the woods. After it left, and after what seemed like an eternity, Sasha turned in a hushed tone. "I think he found his friends." Me, Charlie Baker, and Marcus Kennedy sat by the campfire with our Cub Scout troop. 3 best friends, all enjoying each other's company. Charlie was in the middle of one of his infamous scary stories. He was always the best storyteller. Everyone could joke that one day he would become an author or something. Gosh, if only that were true. If only he'd just made it past that night. Charlie reached the climax of his story, and we all screamed as the character of the story was attacked by an axe-wielding, goat-headed man. Then it ended, and our screams of terror turned into affirmations and applause. As usual, it was a great story. The others started to tell their scary stories. Marcus told a story about a hook-handed man nailing people to the front door. Another scout told a story about a werewolf stalking a family on the night of the full moon. But none of them matched. None of them reached the terrifying level of Charlie's story. We'd always wondered about his secret, how he'd gotten so good, but he always told us that it just came naturally to him. We didn't believe that, but it was mostly because we still hoped that we'd be as good as him someday. After a long while of sitting by the fire, I noticed Charlie slip away from the fire, exclaiming that he was tired. Not too much later, I agreed with the sentiment and retreated to our tent. It was quite a distance away from the others. I was still warm from the fire and pulled myself into my sleeping bag next to Charlie. I was out. My sleep was good, long and peaceful. That's how it should be, but it was interrupted. That night I experienced something that has haunted me to this very day. It started with me sitting up in the tent next to Charlie. I was hearing things outside, strange grunts, and what I can only describe as barking purrs. They were odd. I can't really describe it, but they almost had a bird-like quality to them. Along with the strange noises were heavy footsteps in the leaves. With every footstep, I slowly began to realize how big the thing must be. I looked around, every which way, worried about what could be outside. Bracing myself, I put a hand against the nylon wall, only to feel something press against it on the other side. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. My body, seemingly in a state of shock, wouldn't let me move. The sounds the creature was making shifted. The barking purr-like sound slowly shifted into this low, droning growl. I shook so violently I thought I might pass out. I'd never heard anything like it. There was absolutely nothing to compare it to. With this new sound came a new, horrible, overwhelming feeling. Dread. That was the feeling that came over me. It was so incredibly all-encompassing that I couldn't move. It was so immense that I felt like I was being suffocated by the emotions. But I don't even know how that's possible. It felt like I was drowning, like one of those nightmares when you're in a car slowly sinking deeper and deeper into the ocean. You know, there's nothing you can do to escape, so you just sit there and shake, dreading your inevitable death. That was the feeling that came over me in that tent. Then another sensation hit me. It wasn't a feeling, it was like something much worse, something much more physical. The smell. The putrid smell of the thing almost made me want to puke. It smelled like a massive dumpster of burning trash. But there was something else there, too. The horrible smell of something dead, something rotting. It smelled like how I'd always thought a skunk would smell. A wet, dead, horrible smell that just makes you wish to never smell again. I wanted to cover my mouth, but I was so afraid I just sat there, drowning in fear and that horrid aroma. I listened to heavy footsteps patrolling around the tent. They rustled the dry leaves and broke branches. It kept going in a concentric circle that slowly seemed to close in on the tent. Suddenly, I began to regret putting our tent so far away from the others. That afternoon, I'd convinced Charlie to help me move it farther from the others. We both liked to go to sleep early and hated being kept up by the other scouts' endless chatter. It was getting closer. Its heavy footsteps grew louder and louder. I imagined the thing growing larger and larger, seeming to feed off my fear. I shook. I wanted to be anywhere but here. I wanted to escape, to see my mom, my dad, my brothers, anyone, and anywhere but here. Then I heard things begin to drag against the nylon of the tent. It sounded scratchy and weird. It sounded similar to nails on a chalkboard, mixed with the sound of dragging your nails on a piece of nylon. The noise of the dragging on the nylon was so shrill, it stung my ears. I was so frozen with dread and fear that I couldn't do anything. I didn't reach to cover them, afraid somehow that it would know I'd moved. I felt weak. I wanted to do something, to move, to scream, but my petrified body refused. I felt lightheaded. I felt sick to my stomach. The smell, the sound, the fear, it all felt so overwhelming. It lasted hours. The whole time I felt I was on the verge of puking or screaming, but I could do nothing but sit there and listen. At some point, a light drizzle began. At first, I hoped that It might drown out the horrible sound, but it might also protect me from the unknown that I so desperately did not want to face. Instead, it just added to the cacophony of horror and terror. It felt like I was on my breaking point. I still sat there, absolutely petrified. My eyes followed the footsteps as they slowly made their way around the tent. Each heavy thump sent a shiver down my spine, reminding me of the immense size and power of whatever horrible thing was out there. That's when I heard it, the sound of ripping nylon. I looked to see something cutting through the tent wall along the zipper. Or, I don't know if cutting would be the right word. It was more like an exact rip from a cut. I looked to see what it was, but it was too dark. I watched the dark shape slowly rip further and further down until there was a gash from top to bottom of the tent. I shook so violently that I had to assume the thing or the person knew I was there. Once the large gash had been made, something dark started to make its way into the tent. I looked, but the smell intensified as it approached. The smell was so bad that my eyes watered. It was such a thick, overpowering smell that it was choking me. I felt like I could taste it, and it was horrendous. I endured through the pain of my tears and looked once more. I saw it began to come inside. It was very large, very hairy. From the small amount I could see, it looked to be a limb. It reached into the tent, seemingly being careful not to let any more of its body in. Its limb, its arms, slunk further and further in, and I almost wanted to throw up. That thing, that arm, was way too big, way too long. It could reach from the door to me without even putting its shoulder into the tent. It felt so uncanny, so wrong. It looked like something you might see in a night terror, but the worst part was it was real. It seemed to reach around the tent, seemingly trying to find what was inside. When its arm bumped against my backpack, it grabbed hold of it with what seemed to be freakishly long fingers before slowly and eerily dragging the bag out of the tent. My fear didn't die, but gradually lessened, knowing that it was only here for that. The thing just wanted my bag. As it slowly lifted the backpack, it struggled. The large bag hardly fit through the hole. Little pieces and parts of it kept getting caught as the thing tried to yank it through. The still, omnipresent droning call was interrupted by a growl, followed by a loud rip. The bag disappeared through the now significantly larger hole. The hole flapped open and closed in the light breeze, and I could make out the massive dark shape of the creature. I looked away, horrified at the size of the thing. Silence for a split second. I listened to the thing as it rustled around with the bag, letting out slight grunts that sounded frustrated. It fiddled with the bag for an amount of time I can't determine, before it let out one especially loud grunt and a loud ripping sound, then a clatter of contents as my bag fell to the ground. I recognized all the different sounds, the thunk of my water bottle, the thump of my clothes, the crash of my utensils, the clinking crunch of a bag of chips. It fiddled around with the objects. Crack! The sound of it shattering something made me jump internally. I was still so scared of this thing. Up to this point, it hadn't actually shown any aggression. It had seemingly just been curious. But the mere thought of it breaking something changed that idea. I prayed in my head that this thing would go away. I just wanted to go back to sleep. I didn't care if it took my things or whatever. As long as it didn't hurt me, I didn't care. I listened to the shrill noise of a plastic bag of chips being torn apart. Heavy snuffling followed, and I could vaguely hear the crunching of the thing eating a chip. It ate all the other chips as slowly as it had eaten the first. It seemed to be enjoying them, taking its time with each individual delicacy. Once it was done, I felt through the ground its weight shift back towards the tent. My heart started thundering like it was a marathon runner. That temporary relief had been destroyed in a mere instant. The horrible call began to come again, and all the fear returned in full, overwhelming force. Unable to move, still, I watched helplessly as the arm forced its way back through the hole. I felt its long, wet fingers briefly brush against my sleeping bag. They were so long. They reminded me of gnarled branches or the long legs of some spider thing. The fingers seemed to examine the bag for a second before pulling it. My life flashed before my eyes. Me, a 10-year-old boy, had to consider that I might be about to die, that something that shouldn't exist was about to drag me out and kill me. I shifted slightly, petrified, imagining it pulling me out and eating me whole. It let go of my bag. I closed my eyes in relief, praying it would just leave. But the arm slowly drifted to the other sleeping bag. Charlie. I'd been so terrified that I didn't even think about him, so occupied with my own well-being that I hadn't thought of my best friend. He lay next to me, still sleeping soundly with a slight grin on his face. I wanted to do something, to say something, but I could do nothing but stare as the thing began to grab at the end of his sleeping bag. Charlie didn't shake, didn't move, didn't even react. Time seemed to freeze as its hand glided to the end of his bag. It seemed to caress the bag for a moment before it gave a big yank. I felt his weight shift about within the confines of the tent. I can't explain, though Charlie seemed to satisfy it better. It got a tight grip on the bag and began pulling him out of the tent. It was prolonged, and he was slowly pulled out 1 inch at a time. His eyes opened wide, and without moving his head, he looked towards the hand. His face became flat with terror, but like me, he was frozen in fear as it slowly pulled him outside. His fear only seemed to grow when the end of the sleeping bag disappeared beyond the rip of the tent. Gradually, more and more were pulled out. I shook as one of my best friends disappeared through a hole in the tent wall. Just before he finally disappeared, his eyes met mine. They were terrified and seemed to plead for help, for someone to save him from this horrible fate. But there was no one. Once he was completely gone, I heard shuffling and fabric ripping as the sleeping bag was shredded. I imagined some giant with long fingernails clawing away at the helpless sleeping bag, trying to get at my friend. Then the ripping sound stopped, and I heard the slight thump through the pitter-patter of rain. Then the sleeping bag was thrown into the puddle with a splash, sounding much lighter now. It was then I realized that it had ripped him out of the bag and was now taking him away. I heard heavy footsteps growing fainter and fainter before fading away entirely. Once the footsteps couldn't be heard, the sound stopped. The horrible droning sound had finally stopped. Sobs and cries escaped my mouth, which quickly turned to agonized screams. I cried out words. I can't tell you what I said. I was in such a panic that it was just a word salad of pure panic thoughts. I think I may have said monster or Charlie, but I can't be sure. I heard the yelps and screams of the other scouts in reaction to my own. I shook in the corner of my tent as I heard my leader make his way over. I heard the thunk of his boots until they stopped. He hadn't reached my tent yet, so I couldn't comprehend when he'd stopped walking. Then he gasped. The thunking turned to a slam as he sprinted the rest of the way over and peeked inside the tent, calling our names. He saw me alone and shaking, too traumatized to even speak, besides a single phrase. Charlie. It took Charlie. My eyes slowly opened. The soft, slightly sticky warmth of my modest one-bedroom apartment hung like an oppressive reminder that I, as an unemployed and nearly penniless tenant, couldn't afford to turn on my air conditioning. I'd fallen asleep in a slump against the old brown leather couch in the living room. Again. I groaned as my body shifted into place, stretching my legs and arms about, feeling them wake up as I did. July in Georgia is not forgiving, and it certainly took no prisoners. The hours I had whittled away, I spent largely just laying around, hoping my email notification would go off regarding a potential job. This cycle had been ongoing for about a week or two, and honestly made time seem even more warped. My mind berated me. Was I doing enough? Should I be burning through my very nearly non-existent savings like this? I shouldn't be picky. I should just go get whatever job I can. Beggars can't be choosers, you know. Attempting to shake off the mental fog, I got up quickly from the couch, walked over to the mini-fridge against the adjacent wall, and took out an ice-cold soda. Placing the cold can against my head, I sighed, having momentary relief and trying to reassure myself that I was making the right decision. I deserve the right job. I have the experience. I have the skill set. I shouldn't just settle. One of these opportunities will pan out. I just know it. Feeling a renewed sense of vigor, I turned to my phone, charging on the tablet that sat beside the couch. I nabbed it up and looked at the screen to see the time, 4:37 p.m., and nothing else but my screensaver, some generic mountain range captured at dusk that always made me feel nostalgic for a place I'd never been. I let out another sigh and glanced around the space, the warm living quarters, and thought about how to kill the rest of my day. That's when I heard it, outside my apartment window. A lady's voice, fairly young, exuberant, happy, slightly wrong. "I see you, peekaboo, I see you," she said. Sounded like she was talking to a kid, maybe even a baby. I was half tempted to pull back the curtains and scan the lawn to see, but I thought if she was there and some weird dude started staring at her, well, that'd be awkward. I'm not overly familiar with my neighbors in the apartment across the way, but I'd never seen a kid or a baby, and I'd never heard a voice like that before. To a normal person, you'd think, why is a lady talking to a baby weird? And you know, I'd agree with you, but I'd spent too much time indoors with nothing but my own mind to keep me company. And I'm sure you can guess that leads to heightened anxiety. Christopher, get a hold of yourself, dude. Spent too many days sitting in this apartment, moping around. Now, some lady's talking to a baby, and it's got you freaked out. I let out a chuckle at myself for being stupid. What a dumbass. I cracked the soda open and took a gulp, letting the carbonation and sugar simultaneously burn and soothe my throat. I let out a hearty ah afterwards, and it seemed to amuse me. I finished the soda and another 2 gulps, walked over to the trash can situated near the sink, and chucked it in. Walking back into the living room, I noticed there was no longer any game of peekaboo being cooed outside my window, and all had returned to normal and uninteresting silence. With that, I turned my attention back to my phone, deciding I would manually check my emails. Sometimes the notifications didn't always work as intended, and I was desperate for some sign of forward momentum. As I placed my finger over the email icon on my home screen, the exuberant, joyful, and even a little warped voice rang out again. "I see you! Peekaboo, I see you!" This time it wasn't coming from behind me, beyond the curtained window. It was coming from my porch, right behind my front door. I stared in confusion in that direction. What in the hell? I could feel anxiety, anxious energy surging through my body. My mind wasn't sure how to process the voice or what was happening. Why is the voice at my door? Why does it sound like that? Tried to quickly rationalize it. Maybe she was waiting for a friend across the way. The Carolwoods, I think. Maybe she's friends or family or something. It's hot, and she's got her baby and is trying to keep him calm or entertained. My brain was rooting around, trying to red yarn its way to some conclusion that made the voice that was now just past my front door less out of place, less strange. "Get it together," I said. Then it hit me. I was dramatizing a situation because I was bored and not very productive. Of course, duh, I chuckled again at my own stupidity. I'm going to go to my room and watch TV. The fan blows better in there anyway, and I'll be away from the ladies' annoying blabbering. I'm not scared, I'm just annoyed, that's all. I lied to make myself feel less like a wuss who was evading a strange scenario and more like someone who was choosing to avoid an obnoxious situation. I sat up and quickly walked down the hall, the ladies disorderly, joyful, and robotic "I see you" fading away. Upon entering my modest room, which housed a bed, a sofa chair, a small closet, and a smaller bathroom, I shut the door and, out of some animal-born sense of security, I locked it. I plopped down in the sofa chair and quickly booted up my TV and launched Netflix. I was paranoid about nothing. I knew that, but stranger things have happened, and I wasn't going to assume I was safe. Despite not being able to hear the lady anymore, I cranked the volume over my usual listening threshold. I sat back and began to watch a documentary on panda preserves. Before I knew it, my eyes had grown heavy and my body and mind had given themselves over to sleep yet again. Sometime later, I jolted awake, the dark room and the TV off due to its power save setting. What had woken me was the soft pulsation of my phone as it vibrated. The caller ID read, "Mom." I stared at it, half out of grogginess, half out of cowardice. Do I want to talk to her? Or, as it usually goes with my mother, do I want to be talked at by her? I decided against answering. I was already feeling annoyed at myself enough. I didn't need a good old dogpiling from my mother to top it all off. Plus, I had to pee. God, did I have to pee. I got up and hustled the few short steps into the connecting bathroom, flicked on the lights, and as I was about to unbuckle my pants, from past the door to my bedroom came the voice. It was the lady's voice. Joyful, sweet, energetic, loud, and very, very wrong. "I see you! Peekaboo! I see you!" There was no denying it now. The voice sounded human, but it wasn't. It was slightly warped, as if the edges of it were being warped, as if the mouth forming them was too misshapen to form them right, as if the voice projecting them was doing its best to mock it. My mind raced. This seemed unbelievable. This was absolutely less than 3 feet away, inside my apartment. Why was it doing this to me? I blinked hard and gathered what resolve I had. It didn't matter what or why this was happening. It just was. And I could safely conclude that whatever it was intending to scare me, or worse, to hurt me. I had my phone. I could call 911. That was step one. Step two, I had a baseball bat in my closet. I grabbed that and ready myself. Step three, I had a small window that dropped down into the courtyard. It was on the second floor, but I could manage the jump, I think. That's all I could think to do. With all the bluster and bravado I could muster, I quickly moved to the sofa chair and grabbed my phone, and made my way to open the closet and grab the bat, all in a few swift movements. All the while, the lady was cooing the same phrase over and over again on a loop, no more than 5 feet away. I wrestled with the lock on the bedroom window. It wasn't playing nice. I didn't think I'd ever opened it in the 4 years that I'd lived here, and it obviously hadn't been opened long before then. After struggling with the latch for what felt like eternity, it gave way. Then it proceeded to push up on the window. Luckily, it went flying up without much resistance, and as I pushed it up, it made a hard slamming sound. As if on cue when that happened, the chanting from the lady outside the door stopped. It was dead silent. The only discernible sound was my breathing, the night air flowing in and bringing with it the sounds of crickets and cicadas. I sat by the open window, wide-eyed, staring directly into the dinky lit room and laser-focused on the bedroom door. From beneath the door frame, an impossibly long arm silently began to stretch in. Skin pale, almost blue in the light, vascular, the fingers long, bony, and dressed in rings against their bulking knuckles. The fingernails, longer still and adorned in crimson polish that almost seemed to glow in the drearily lit bedroom. The impossibly long arm effortlessly stretched up until its index finger touched the lock on the doorknob, as if waiting just a beat to heighten the tension. It clicked the lock. The door was unlocked. This lady could swing the door open, and whatever it was could cross the threshold into the room and come for me. I had to jump. The risk of breaking my leg be damned. I didn't want to see what ghoulish visage that arm belonged to. I steeled my nerves and jumped the 12 or so feet to the grassy courtyard below. I landed with a hard thud, but I didn't lose my balance. My adrenaline rushing, I made a hasty dash towards the center of the small complex. My legs were firing like pistons. I gunned it to the nearest light source, which happened to be a small gazebo. Then my fight-or-flight responses loosened enough for me to think, I gotta call the cops. As I approached the small structure, which was bathed in a harsh and singular white light, I pivoted to look back at my apartment window. No hand, no creature, no nothing. Just an open window. But what could I expect to see? Some ghoulish, haunting leer that came from the darkened opening? Some unholy visage, all teeth and elongated appendages, coaxing me back? What was going on with me? Was I having some sort of breakdown? Had the stress and the loneliness gotten to me? That was certainly a better explanation than what I was thinking was happening, right? I sighed, plopped down hard on the only bench housed under the gazebo, and unlocked my phone. I had a notification, an email. I knew no matter, now wasn't the time. I needed to call the police. I needed to make sure my apartment was clear. If I was having a mental breakdown, I could get help. I needed this, whatever it was, to be over. But, you know, that often unseen hand that guides us to make the most inane decisions at the wrong moment? Yeah, that one. That force propelled me to click on the email notification. God damn it, I wish I hadn't. It took me to a video. The video was dark, quiet, as if nothing was even playing, but then a loud static and the sounds of hands fumbling around as the frame was jilted and shook. And then, as if lit with a small and barely effective flashlight, a mouth plastered with a wry grin appeared. But, as with the voice, it was wrong. It was too wide, with far too many small teeth. The lips were thin and smeared with crimson lipstick, the same shade as the fingernails I'd seen just a moment ago. Then it began to move, to speak. "I see you, peekaboo. I see you." I felt my body flush with fear, confusion, anger. What the hell was happening? I tried to exit. I tried shutting my phone's power off, but nothing worked. I instinctively and forcefully dropped the phone. The mantra was on a disturbing repeat. The lady's joyous and warped voice, a disgusting lullaby I had to get away from. Whatever ungodly force had decided to visit me was breaking the bounds of reality and anything I understood. Neighbors, my mind yelled at me. Go to the Carolwoods. Ask to use their phone. Call 911. Figure this shit out. Go! I spurred myself into action, running out from beneath the gazebo and towards the other two-story apartment complex, directly across from mine, navigating the dimly lit walkway up to their door. I didn't have concern for etiquette or what time it was. I was in pure self-preservation mode. I knocked on their door as loud as I could. What's the wife's name? Denise, Desiree, something with a D. I simultaneously scolded myself while trying to recall the woman's name. Her husband, who I'd only met once in passing, was a complete stranger. Before I could deliberate any further, the porch light popped on and a voice from behind the door wavered out at me. It was a man, the aforementioned husband. What the hell do you want? I'm so sorry to bother you, Mr. Carolwood, but someone broke into my house and I don't have my cell and I'm worried. I need to call the cops. I live across the way in Unit 17. He cut me off. Yeah, Christian, right? He said, his tone less unsure and worried and now more curious than annoyed. Christopher, I responded back hurriedly while throwing another glance at my apartment unit. Another voice, quieter, came out from behind him. A woman. Christopher, honey? Yeah, you sound scared. Let me get you some help. Thank God, Buddha, Shiva, Elvis, who the fuck ever. I sighed. I felt a wave of uncertain hope wash over me. The door unlatched and swung open to reveal a dark opening, one that seemed to stretch into a void. There was no one there. No Mr. Carolwood. No Mrs. Carolwood. Just a dark hallway and a voice that loudly reached from just beyond its bounds. I see you, peekaboo. I see you, Christopher. As quickly as I had felt hope, I felt my body give itself over to absolute terror. I spun around and attempted to run, but that long, pale blue arm, the one with its nails adorned in a bright, glowing crimson polish, had wrapped its unnatural fingers all the way around my calf. I fell hard on the "We're so glad you're here" welcome mat that decorated the front porch of the Carolwoods. I managed to turn my body around to see the arm that was pulling me into the void. I couldn't see the creature it was attached to. I didn't want to. I needed to fight. I needed to get loose. But I was being dragged by force so strong, any attempt I made to swing my bat or kick was met with pure indifference. This is it, my mind raced. My heart thrashed inside my chest so hard I felt like I'd have a heart attack or worse, die of fear. I swung the bat. I yelled. I cursed. It was no use. I was being drawn into the maw of this entity, this being, this thing. I shut my eyes and waited to die. I stopped moving. I didn't feel the hand on my leg anymore. I felt warm. I jolted awake. I was in my apartment. The sticky heaviness of the room, just as it had been hours before. The golden light from the afternoon poured in through what cracks it could. What the hell? I thought. Did I just dream that? As I straightened my stiff and slightly aching body up and coming to grips with the absolute deja vu, a voice rang out from down the hall, this time slow and loud, and just past the threshold of my sight. Peekaboo, I see you. In the quiet suburbs of Greenwood Heights, Laura and Daniel lived an idyllic life. Their neighbors admired them for their impeccable manners, their beautiful home, and their apparent dedication to community activities. No one suspected the darkness behind their polished facade, the carefully concealed secrets that defined their twisted existence. For years, Laura and Daniel had operated as a meticulous duo of child abductors. They preyed on vulnerable targets, carefully selecting children who seemed easy to snatch away without raising suspicion. Each abduction was carefully planned, executed with chilling precision, and followed by a meticulous cover-up operation to evade detection. On a particularly stormy night, their target was Emily, a 10-year-old girl with a penchant for drawing and a love for her pet cat. The rain pounded against the windows as Laura and Daniel crept through the shadows, their hearts racing with anticipation. They moved swiftly, silently, expertly bypassing the creaky floorboards of Emily's bedroom. With a precision born of practice, they snatched Emily from her bed, muffling her cries before they could alert her sleeping parents. In mere minutes, they were out of the house and driving away into the night, leaving only a child's empty room and bewildered parents who would soon be plunged into the depths of anguish. In the days that followed, the disappearance of Emily sent shockwaves through the Greenwood Heights area. The community rallied together, organizing search parties, distributing flyers, and pleading for any information that could lead to her safe return. Laura and Daniel, acting the part of concerned neighbors, joined in the search efforts, their expressions carefully schooled into masks of worry and grief. But unlike their previous abductions, Emily's disappearance did not trigger the expected alarm. No Amber Alert was flashing on TV screens. No breaking news updates on the local channels. It was as if Emily had vanished into thin air without a trace, and the eerie silence that followed unnerved Laura and Daniel more than they cared to admit. As the days stretched into weeks with no progress in the search for Emily, Laura and Daniel grew emboldened. They began to plan their next abduction, confident in their ability to continue their reign of terror without consequence. Their next target was Sara, a 9-year-old girl who lived on the outskirts of town, far from prying eyes and concerned neighbors. On a moonless night, Laura and Daniel struck again. They lured Sara into their car under the guise of offering her a ride home from the park, her innocent trust unknowingly sealing their fate. As they drove deeper into the darkness, Sara's laughter filled the car, oblivious to the malevolent intent lurking behind the facade of smiles. Arriving at their scheduled hideout, an old cabin nestled deep in the woods, Laura and Daniel believed they were in control. Their previous successes reinforced their false sense of invulnerability. They ushered Sara inside, confident in their ability to keep her subdued and compliant. But Sara was different. Unbeknownst to Laura and Daniel, Sara was not an ordinary child. She was a vessel for a malevolent entity that had, since their darkness, drawn to it like a moth to a flame. As the hours passed and midnight approached, the atmosphere inside the cabin grew charged with unsettling energy. Shadows seemed to dance in the corners, and the air hummed with an otherworldly presence. Sara's behavior shifted subtly at first, her gaze unnervingly steady, her words carrying an uncanny wisdom far beyond her years. Laura and Daniel brushed off these signs of unease, dismissing them as their paranoia and fatigue from the latest crime. But then, the inexplicable began to unfold. Objects moved on their own, sliding across tables and crashing to the floor. Whispers echoed through the empty rooms, words that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Sara's laughter took on a chilling edge, her eyes darkening with a malevolent gleam that sent shivers down Laura and Daniel's spine. As the night wore on, the entity within Sara began to assert its dominance. Sara's body contorted unnaturally, her voice shifting to a guttural growl that spoke ancient languages unknown to human ears. Laura and Daniel watched in growing horror as the child they had abducted became a conduit for something far beyond their comprehension, a force that thrived on fear and suffering. Their attempts to restrain Sara were futile. Ropes slipped through their fingers as if guided by an invisible hand, and locks on doors clicked open of their own accord. Panic set in as Laura and Daniel realized they were no longer the hunters. They had become the hunted, trapped in a nightmarish game where the rules were dictated by forces they could not control. In a desperate bid for survival, Laura and Daniel tried to flee the cabin, their footsteps echoing loudly in the oppressive silence of the night. But each path they chose seemed to lead them deeper into the heart of darkness, further away from the safety of the outside world and closer to the entity's domain. Sara, now fully under the entity's control, pursued them relentlessly. She moved with an unnatural grace, appearing and disappearing like a phantom in the shadows. Her laughter rang out like a macabre symphony, haunting Laura and Daniel's every step as they stumbled through the labyrinthine corridors of their own making. Exhausted, on the brink of madness, Laura and Daniel found themselves cornered in the cabin's dimly lit basement. The air was heavy with the stench of fear and the palpable presence of the entity, its dark energy coalescing around them like a suffocating shroud. With nowhere left to run, and their backs against the cold stone wall, Laura and Daniel faced the ultimate reckoning. They were forced to confront the horrifying truth of what they had become: monsters in human form, responsible for unspeakable atrocities that had torn families apart and left scars that would never heal. As Sara stood before them, her eyes blazing with the fury of the entity within, Laura and Daniel begged for mercy. They pleaded for their lives, their voices trembling with terror and regret. But there was no mercy to be found in the entity's wrath, no forgiveness for those who had willingly embraced the darkness in their pursuit of power and control. In a final act of defiance, Sara raised her hands, and the cabin trembled as if caught in the throes of an earthquake. Shadows, twisted and writhed, merged with Sara's form until she appeared as a spectral figure bathed in ethereal light. With a single gesture, she unleashed a torrent of supernatural force that consumed Laura and Daniel, their screams drowned out by the deafening roar of the entity's triumph. A storm raged on the outside, oblivious to the horrors that had unfolded within the cabin walls. The night sky remained indifferent to the fate of Laura and Daniel, their names destined to be whispered in hushed tones as a cautionary tale of the darkness that lurks within the human soul. As dawn broke over Greenwood Heights, the cabin stood silent and still, its secrets buried beneath layers of moss and ivy. The community continued with their lives, unaware of the evil that had once hidden in plain sight amongst them, the evil that had been unleashed and ultimately consumed its creators. I never thought I'd dread waking up, but here I am, eyes squeezed shut, praying that when I open them, I'll see something, anything different. My name's Marcus Thomas, 32 years old, and I'm trapped in a nightmare that I can't escape. It started like any other day. I remember it perfectly, every little detail. The smell of coffee brewing downstairs, the sound of Aisha humming in the kitchen, the warmth of the sunlight streaming through the bedroom window. I sat up, stretching, and glanced at the clock. 7:15 a.m., right on schedule. I padded downstairs, following the scent of breakfast. Aisha stood at the stove, her back to me, swaying slightly as she flipped pancakes. Her dark curls were piled up on her head, and she wore my old college t-shirt, the one with the hole in the sleeve that she refused to throw away. "Morning, beautiful," I said, wrapping my arms around her waist and planting a kiss on her neck. She laughed and leaned back against me. "Morning, sleepyhead. I was beginning to think you'd sleep through your alarm again." "Not a chance," I replied, reaching around her to snag a piece of bacon from a plate on the counter. "Can't be late today. Big presentation, remember?" Aisha swatted my hand playfully. "How could I forget? You've been stressing about it for weeks." We ate breakfast together, chatting about our plans for the day. Aisha had a busy schedule at the elementary school where she taught 3rd grade. I had my presentation to the board, which could lead to a big promotion if it went well. As I was finishing my coffee, Aisha glanced at her watch. "Oh, I better get going. Parent-teacher conference this afternoon, so I need to get there early to set up." She stood, grabbing her bag and her keys. I rose to walk her to the door, as I always did. "Knock 'em dead, babe," she said, stretching up on her toes to kiss me goodbye. "You're gonna do great." "Thanks. Have a good day." "Love you," I said, squeezing her hand. "Love you too," she called over her shoulder as she headed for the car. I watched her pull out of the driveway, waving as she drove. Then I went back inside to finish getting ready for work. The day passed in a blur of meetings and last-minute preparations. By the time my presentation rolled around at 3 p.m., I was running on pure adrenaline and caffeine. But it went well, better than I'd hoped, actually. The board seemed impressed, and my boss even hinted at that promotion as we wrapped up. I was on cloud 9 as I packed up my things, ready to head home and celebrate with Aisha. I pulled out my phone to call her, wanting to share the good news right away. That's when everything changed. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a voice I didn't recognize answered it. "Hello? Is this Marcus Thomas?" My stomach dropped. Something in the woman's tone sent ice through my veins. "Yes, this is Marcus," I replied, my voice suddenly hoarse. "Who is this?" "Mr. Thomas, this is Nurse Reeves at Mercy General Hospital. I'm calling about your wife, Aisha. There's been an accident." The world tilted on its axis. I grabbed the edge of the desk, knuckles turning white. What happened? Is she okay? The pause before the nurse responded lasted an eternity. I'm so sorry, Mr. Thomas. Your wife was brought in about an hour ago. There was a multi-car pileup on the highway. The doctors did everything they could, but I'm afraid she didn't make it. I'm so sorry for your loss. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering on the floor. This couldn't be real. It had to be a mistake. I'd just seen Aisha this morning. We made plans for dinner. She was fine. She had to be fine. The next few hours passed in a haze. Somehow, I made it to the hospital. I remember the harsh fluorescent lights, the antiseptic smell, the pitying looks from the staff, and then seeing her lying there so still, so unlike the vibrant woman I'd kissed goodbye this morning. I don't know how long I sat there, holding her hand, willing her to wake up, to smile at me once more, to tell me this was all a cruel joke. But she didn't. Eventually, a gentle-voiced doctor came to take me away, to discuss arrangements I couldn't begin to comprehend. I don't remember driving home. I don't remember climbing the stairs to our bedroom. Our bed, where Alicia would never sleep again. I just remember collapsing onto the mattress, still in my suit, and praying that when I woke up, this would all be a terrible dream. Sleep came, eventually, a blessed escape from the crushing weight of grief. And then I opened my eyes. The smell of coffee drifted from downstairs, sunlight streaming through the bedroom window. For one blissful moment, I thought my prayers had been answered. Then I heard it, Alicia humming from the kitchen. I sat bolt upright, heart pounding, the clock on the nightstand reading 7:15 a.m. Impossible. I scrambled out of bed, nearly falling in my haste to get downstairs, and there she was, Alicia, alive and well, standing at the stove in my old college t-shirt, flipping pancakes. "Morning, sleepyhead," she said, glancing over her shoulder at me. "I was beginning to think you'd sleep through your alarm." I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. This was impossible. "Marcus?" Alicia's smile faded, replaced by concern. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I crossed the kitchen in 2 slides, pulling her into my arms so tightly that she let out a surprised oof. "Whoa, what's gotten into you?" she laughed, returning the hug. "Bad dream," I managed to choke out, burying my face in her hair, breathing in her familiar scent. "Really, really bad dream." Alicia pulled back, cupping my face in her hands. "Well, you're awake now. Everything's fine, okay?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, because suddenly I remembered I'd lived this before. Yesterday morning. The morning Alicia died. As we ate our breakfast, my mind raced. Had it all been a dream? Some kind of stress-induced hallucination? It had felt so real, so visceral, but here was Alicia, alive and well, talking about her parent-teacher conference as if nothing had happened. I tried to shake it off, the lingering dread, as Alicia gathered her things to leave, but as she reached for her car keys, panic seized me. "Wait, don't drive today, please," I blurted out, grabbing her wrist. She frowned. "What? Why not?" I scrambled for an explanation that wouldn't make me sound insane. "I have a bad feeling. Can you carpool with someone, or could I drive you?" "Marcus, I can't just change my plans at the last minute. I need my car for errands after work, remember?" She studied my face, worry creasing my brow. "Are you okay? That must have been some nightmare." I forced a smile, trying to appear calm. "Yeah, sorry. I'm fine. Just be careful. I love you." "I love you too," she replied, still looking concerned. "Try not to stress too much about your presentation. You're going to do great." And then she was gone, just like before. I watched her pull out of the driveway, my heart in my throat. I spent the morning in a state of high anxiety, jumping every time my phone rang. But as the hours ticked by with no bad news, I started to relax. Maybe it really had just been a nightmare. My presentation went well, just as it had in my memory? I wasn't sure what to call it anymore, so as I packed up my things afterward, I decided to call Alicia just to put my mind at ease. The phone rang twice, 3 times. Hello? Is this Marcus Thomas? Ice flooded into my veins. Same voice, same words. Mr. Thompson, this is Nurse Reeves from Mercy General Hospital. I'm calling about your wife, Alicia. She's been in an accident. No. This couldn't be happening. Not again. What happened? I demanded, even though I already knew the answer. I'm so sorry, Mr. Thompson. Your wife was brought in about an hour ago. There was an accident at the school where she works. A student parent became violent, and I'm afraid Alicia didn't make it. I'm so sorry for your loss. The phone slipped from my numb fingers. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But as I raced to the hospital, as I saw Alicia's still form once again, as I held her lifeless hand, I knew it was all too real. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the core that when I woke up tomorrow, it would all begin again. I don't know how many times I've lived this day now. 10, 50, 100, they've all blurred together in a nightmarish haze of grief and desperation. Each morning, I wake up at 7:15 a.m. Each morning, I rush downstairs to find Alicia alive, humming in the kitchen. Each evening, no matter what I do, I receive that dreaded phone call. I've tried everything I can think of. I've begged her to stay home. I've faked an illness, a family emergency. I've disconnected her car battery. I've slashed her tires. I've hidden her keys. I've called the school with bomb threats. I've tried to get it shut down for the day. Nothing works. If Alicia stays home, she dies in a house fire. If she can't drive, she takes the bus, which crashes. If the school closes, she goes to run errands instead and gets caught in a store robbery gone wrong. It's like the universe itself is conspiring to take her from me, over and over and over again. Today I decided to try a different approach. Instead of trying to keep Alicia home or safe, I'll stay with her all day. Maybe from there I can protect her. When she leaves for work, I follow in my car. She notices, of course, pulling over after a few blocks. "Marcus, what are you doing?" she asks as I approach her window, her voice a mix of confusion and concern. I need to be with you today," I say, knowing how crazy that must sound. "Please, Alicia, trust me. It's important." She studies my face for a long moment and then sighs. "Okay, get in, but you're explaining on the way." As we drive, I try to tell her the truth about the time loop, about her dying every day, about my desperate attempt to save her. Alicia listens silently, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. Finally, she says, "Marcus, I think you need help. This isn't normal. Maybe we should go to the hospital instead of work." "No," I said, making her jump. No hospitals. Please, Alicia, just let me stay with you today. If nothing happens, I promise I'll get help tomorrow." She agrees, reluctantly. We spend the day together at her school. I hover anxiously, scanning for threats, jumping at every sudden noise. Alicia's colleagues give us odd looks, but she makes excuses about a family situation. As the final bell rings, I begin to hope maybe this time it'll work out. Maybe I've finally broken the cycle. We're walking to her car when I hear the screech of tires. I turn to see a car careening towards us, the driver slumped over the wheel. Time slows. I reach for her, trying to pull Alicia out of the way, but I'm too slow. Always too slow. The impact throws us both. I hit the ground hard, my vision blurring. When it clears, I see her lying motionless a few feet away, a growing pool of blood beneath her. "No," I whisper, crawling towards her. No, not again, please, not again." But it's too late. By the time the ambulance arrives, she's gone. I'm left once more with the certainty that tomorrow it'll begin again. The next day, I don't even get out of bed. What's the point? Nothing I do makes a difference. Alicia always dies, and I'm left alone with the grief. I hear her calling from downstairs, concern in her voice, but I can't face her. I can't watch her die again. Eventually, she comes up to check on me. Marcus, are you okay? I roll over, burying my face in the pillow. Go away, Alicia, please. The bed dips as she sits beside me, her hands gentle on my back. What's wrong? Talk to me. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me. So I do. I tell her everything, my voice muffled by the pillow, about the time loop, about watching her die over and over, about the failed attempts to save her. When I finish, silence stretches between us. Then Alicia speaks, her voice trembling slightly. I don't understand what's happening, Marcus, but I believe that you believe it. And I'm here. Whatever this is, we'll face it together. I roll over, meeting her eyes. The love and concern I see there breaks something inside me. I pull her into my arms, holding her tight as sobs rack my body. We spend the day at home, talking, crying, trying to make sense of the impossible situation. As evening approaches, I grow increasingly anxious. Maybe it'll be different this time, she says, squeezing my hand. Maybe staying home was the answer. I want to believe her, but as the clock ticks towards the dreaded hour, a sense of the inevitable settles over me. At 4:17, exactly when the call usually comes in, there's a knock on the door instead. Alicia moves to answer it, but I hold her back. No, let me. I open the door to find two solemn-faced police officers. Mr. Thompson, I'm afraid we have some bad news. There's been an accident. I don't hear them, because behind them on the street I see a familiar figure, a man in a dark suit watching us. As our eyes meet, he smiles, a cold, cruel expression that chills me to the core. Then he turns and walks away, vanishing into thin air. I slam the door shut, my mind reeling. Who was that? What did it mean? But there's no time to ponder, because Alicia's on the floor, clutching her chest, gasping for air. Heart attack. That's what the paramedics say when they arrive. Nothing anyone could have done. As I watch them take Alicia's body away, that strange man's smile haunts me. For the first time, I wonder if there's more to this nightmare than I realize. The next morning, I wake up with a new determination. If I can't save Alicia, and God, it kills me to even think that, maybe I can at least find out why this is happening. I go through the motions of the morning, hugging Alicia tightly before she leaves. Then I set out to find the man in the suit. I drive around town, watching for him. Hours pass with no sign. As 4:17 approaches, I find myself near the park where Alicia and I had our first date. There he is, sitting on a bench, feeding pigeons. I approach cautiously, my heart pounding. Who are you? Why are you doing this to me? He looks up, the same cold smile on his face. Ha, Marcus, I was wondering when you'd find me. You know my name? I know everything about you, Marcus. And Alicia. A chill runs down my spine. Are you... what? Are you God? The devil? The man's laughter rings out, harsh and mocking. Nothing so grand, I'm afraid. Think of me as an interested observer. Observer of what? I asked, my fist clenched at my side. He stands, brushing breadcrumbs off of his suit. Of you, Marcus. Of your pain, your grief, your desperation. It's all quite fascinating, really. Rage boils up inside me. I lunge at him, intent on wiping that smug smile off his face. But my hands pass right through him, like he's made of smoke. Now, none of that. We're just getting to know each other. Why? Why are you doing this? The man's smile fades, replaced by a look of cold curiosity. Why? Because I can. Because your suffering amuses me. Because I want to see how long it takes to break you completely. His words hit me like a physical blow. I stagger back, shaking my head in denial. No, this can't be real. You can't be real. Oh, I'm very real, Marcus. And this is very, very real. For you, at least. My phone rings. 4:17 p.m. I already know what I'm going to hear when I answer it. The man in the suit watches me, his head tilted in interest. Well, aren't you going to get that? I'm sure it's important news about dear Alicia. I want to run, I want to scream, I want to wake up from this nightmare, but I'm rooted to the spot, trapped in this moment of horror. As I raise the phone to my ear, the man in the suit begins to fade away, but his parting words echo in my mind long after he's gone. Sweet dreams, Marcus. I'll see you tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. The revelation of the man in the suit haunts me. Each day as I wake to the sound of morning routine, I'm torn between my desperate need to save Alicia and my burning desire to understand, to defeat this cruel entity that's toying with our lives. Today I decide to ignore him completely. I focus all my energy on Alicia, determined to find some way, any way, to break the cycle. Let's run away, I blurt out over breakfast. Alicia pauses, fork halfway to her mouth. What? Let's just go, right now. Get in the car and drive until we can't anymore. She studies my face, concern etching lines around her eyes. Marcus, what's going on? You've been acting strange for days now. I take her hand, willing her to understand. Please, Alicia, trust me. We need to leave, now. Maybe it's the desperation in my voice, or maybe it's the love that's carried us through 7 years of marriage. Whatever the reason, Alicia nods. Okay, well, let's go. We throw some clothes in a bag and hit the road. As we drive out of town, I keep glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the man in the suit following us. But the highway behind us remains clear. For the first time in what feels like an eternity, I begin to hope. We drive for hours, putting miles between us and the town where Alicia has died 100 times. We laugh, we sing along to the radio, we reminisce about old road trips. As the sun begins to set, we pull into a small coastal town. Let's stay here tonight, Alicia suggests, pointing to a quaint little bed and breakfast. I check my watch. It's 6:43. We made it past 4:17, past the time Alicia always dies. We did it, I whisper, tears prickling in my eyes. We really did it. Alicia squeezes my hand. Did what, babe? Before I can answer, a commotion down the street catches my attention. A crowd is gathered, pointing at something in the sky. Is that a plane? Someone shouts. It's flying awfully low. My blood runs cold. No, it can't be. The roar of engines fill the air. I grab Alicia, trying to pull her to safety, but it's too late. The plane crashes into the bed and breakfast in a deafening explosion of fire and debris. In the chaos that follows, the screaming, the sirens, the frantic attempts at rescue, I search desperately for my wife. Deep down, I already know. As I stand there, watching the firefighters battle the blaze, I feel a presence beside me. Did you really think it would be that easy? The man in the suit asks, his tone conversational. That you could outrun fate? I don't look at him. I can't look at him. Why? Why her? Why us? He shrugs, the moment visible from the corner of my eye. Why not? Your pain is exquisite. Your love, your desperation, your growing madness. It's all so deliciously human. I'll stop you. Somehow, I'll find a way. His laughter's like broken glass. Oh, Marcus, I do hope you try. It'll make this game so much more interesting. I wake up the next morning with a new plan. If I can't save Alicia by changing her fate, maybe I can save her by changing mine. I go through the motions of our morning routine one last time, savoring every moment with her. As she leaves for work, I kiss her deeply. I love you, I say. Always remember that. She smiles, a little puzzled. I love you too. You sure you're okay? I nod, forcing a smile. I'm fine. Have a great day, babe. As soon as she's gone, I start gathering supplies. Rope, a chair, a notepad. I write Alicia a letter, pouring out everything. The time loop, the deaths, the man in the suit. I tell her how much I love her, how sorry I am I couldn't save her. I beg her to live a full, happy life. Then I prepare the noose. Just before 4:17, I position myself on the chair. My plan is simple. If I die first, maybe the loop will break. Maybe Alicia will live. As I stand there, heart pounding, the man in the suit appears. My, this is certainly a new approach. Go to hell. You first, he smiles, cold and cruel. I take a deep breath, close my eyes, and step off the chair. The rope pulls tight, and I wake up gasping, back in bed. 7:15 a.m. Another failed attempt. But something's different this time. There's no smell of coffee, no sound of Alicia humming downstairs. I rush to the kitchen, my heart in my throat. It's empty. It's cold. Alicia, I call out, panic rising. Alicia, where are you? She's not here, Marcus, a familiar voice says from behind me. I whirl to find the man in the suit, lounging in my armchair, looking utterly at ease. What did you do? Where is she? He examines his nails, the picture of casual indifference. I didn't do anything. You did. What are you talking about? He sighs, as if explaining to a particularly slow child. You changed the rules, Marcus. You died first. So now, she never existed. The world spins around me. I grab the counter to keep from falling. No, bring her back, please. I can't bring back someone who was never born, he says, standing. But don't worry. I'm sure we can find a new way to continue our little game. As the truth of what I'd done sinks in, I slid to the floor, a scream of anguish tearing up my throat. The man in the suit watches, a small, satisfied smile on his face. Well, shall we begin again? He asks, straightening his jacket. The world fades to black, and I brace myself for whatever fresh hell awaits. Because now I know the truth. There's no escape, no way to win, just an eternity of loss and pain, and the cruel smile of the man in the suit. But as consciousness returns, something feels off. The bed beneath me is harder than usual. The air smells different, antiseptic, sterile. I open my eyes to find myself in a hospital room. Machines beep steadily around me, and there, holding my hand, her eyes red-rimmed from crying, is Alicia. Oh my God, Marcus, can you hear me? I try to speak, but my throat is dry, raw. Alicia holds a cup of water to my lips. What happened? You've been in a coma for 3 months. There was an accident on your way to work. The doctors, they weren't sure you'd ever wake up. My mind reels. A coma? Was it all a dream? The time loops, the deaths, the man in the suit? As if summoned by my thoughts, I see a flicker of movement by the door. The man in the suit stands there, watching. But this time, his smile doesn't seem cruel. It's almost approving. He nods once, then vanishes. "Marcus, are you okay?" Alicia asks, her voice pulling me back. Should I call the doctor?" I look at her, really look at her. My beautiful, vibrant, alive wife. Whatever happened, whatever was real or not real, none of it matters now. "I'm okay. Everything is okay," I say, squeezing her hand. As Alicia calls the doctor, I close my eyes, savoring the feeling of her hand in mine. I don't know if I've won, lost, or simply been released from some cosmic game, but I do know one thing. I'll never take a single moment with Alicia for granted again.